Great. And we're live. How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Ryan Stick Show. Today, I have a special guest. He is not only my friend, but my boss from Stranger Radio, and a bass player in a band I really like called Gob, and a bass player in another band I have yet to hear, but I'm sure I would love, called Theo and the Thugs. How you doing, Steven?
How you doing, buddy? Hello, Internet. Hello. How are you?
When Steven and I first met, the first thing we did was bond over our love of pop culture, comic books, geekdom, and all that kind of stuff. But essentially, you and I are both kind of like musicians that are, one step away from being like the geek in the Breakfast Club, except we're dressed like Bender. So so tell everybody about how does one start playing bass in Gob? Because you're not their first bass player, but you're their longest bass player for sure. You've been in the band like God over a decade now. Tell me your journey.
Yeah, man. We even did like a joke about it. We did like one of our old T-shirts, and by old I mean old for me. So maybe 2009. One of our T-shirts, we kind of did like a fake Tupac shirt. So it's like a huge Tupac. And I think he had a list of like, I don't know who they were. I think he had a list of maybe girlfriends or whoever on his chest with like lines through them. If I'm remembering this right, if not, I apologize for all the hip hop fans out there. But we had a list of all the old bass players that were in Gob with their names crossed out. And there's a lot, man. There's a lot.
Is it like a Spinal Tap situation where most of them spontaneously combust or...
Yeah.
I've only met two of you. I met you and Tyson that played briefly in Gob like right before you.
Yeah. So Tyson was actually my barber. He kind of got into the band. So the kind of maybe the long short of it is I was in an old band called By a Thread. And we were kind of friendly with each other, and eventually, Tom and Theo from Gob produced By a Thread's second album, which was the first album they ever produced themselves. They kind of always co-produced their records, but this was the first time they're kind of really on their own solo producing. So we really got to become friends through that really long process, because we're all kind of learning at that time how to do that kind of shit. And through that long process, we became close, especially me and Theo. He ended up like house sitting my parents' house for them for like a long time. They lived down in California and needed someone to stay there. So he kind of became part of the family quickly. And then the bass player named Craig joined Avril Lavigne's band. So they were looking for someone, and they're kind of like asking around and stuff. And they didn't really come out and ask me straight out, but they kind of asked, like, their manager at the time kind of asked our manager at the time, who really wasn't a manager. He just worked in the mail room of like the record label that their manager worked at, and asked for me to play. But I was so kind of really kind of full. We were doing By a Thread kind of full time and trying to get that off the ground. So it didn't really come to be. But the guy that cut my hair was like a far better bass player. I mean, honestly, I'm like the furthest best bass player. I'm the third best bass player in Gob. Like Tom and Theo are better.
Currently, yeah. Gabe picks up that bass once in a while, just wows everybody.
He's better than me.
Yeah.
But my barber, who just always kind of was like a bass kind of nerd, like a real musician that like knew notes and things, and was always, talking about kind of bass stuff. I'm like, man, you should get my barber to join. And he was in there for a bit. I don't know how long he was in there for. Maybe like a year or two. And then I went out one time just to go hang out, like part of the as an entourage, when you'd kind of go out and just do things. And it was just so fun. I had so much fun just hanging out with those guys. I'm like, man, this would just be fun. And at the time, that band By a Thread was kind of, you could see that light at the end of the tunnel.
The writing on the wall, they say.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that fits because it was an emo-y band. So any kind of horrible lyric like that fits,
Yeah.
And yeah, just joined up, and it's been fun. I mean, it's all about personalities, man, as you know. And as anyone kind of knows with anything, at any job, or any workplace or any relationship. It's about personalities, and it's not about, like, again, I'm the furthest from their most, talented bass player, but it's just about how personalities gel. And it's like a Ghostbusters or like an A team. Like, there can't be two people the same. It's got to be like the A team. They have to be like four different kind of personalities. Always work best, like you said, like the Ninja Turtles, like Ghostbusters, like the A team. You kind of
Yeah.
get four different dudes, and you kind of fill out a puzzle better than if the pieces were the same.
Yeah, absolutely. I was in a band, The Real Deal, for God, like 8 years, and I think 8, 9 years. I think I'm still in the band. I'm not sure. We don't really play much. Uh, but I think they wanted to pick like a dude that could play and someone who was their friend because they're like, hey, here we're going to be in a van together for 9 hours a day, and then we're going to play maybe in front of a huge crowd, maybe in front of nobody, but we need a personality that's going to work. And that we even went out on test tours and stuff like that just to kind of like get me used to the grind. And yeah, I think that it's what it really is. So it's like if you're not going to be a founding member of a band, you definitely got to be like just a something that's going to keep the motor running, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's like you said, it's those I mean, it's kind of cheesy or whatever, but it's like you said, like everyone kind of sees that 1 hour a day when you play a show or they hear your albums, and that's of course like the hugest part. And also a huge part for someone that's in a band is those other 23 hours of riding in the van, you said, or staying in the hotel room. And it's how you gel and how you feel and how they feel with those other 23 hours a day that are kind of almost more important. I think when bands ever break up, there's something about those other 23 hours that is the thing that is the catalyst for breakups or whatever the fuck, or any kind of drama. It's those other 23 hours. When you're on stage, you're kind of just doing your thing and it's a muscle memory. But those other 3 hours is that's the paramount shit. And that's the thing. We have to find people that you actually like a huge thing. And as you know, man, and as you even everyone knows, and maybe people just whisper about it, but the main thing that breaks up the bands is nothing. It's never any creative differences, really. I don't think. It's just personalities, and you have to have not just a like or a love, but you could just have to have a respect for each other, and that can ride through any kind of like or love, because you're going to have fights and you're going to have shitty misunderstandings, and it's always a weird ego dance of creativity and shit. But if you have that respect, and that's the key to longevity, I think. And that's just for all fucking bullshit relationships. It doesn't have to just be a fucking bunch of old fucks in a van.
Yeah, exactly. And I noticed you said like, oh, when you're in the hotel room, I'm like, dude, I can count on I can count on two hands in 8 years in the band that Real Deal, like, spent in hotel rooms. It was mainly like Walmart parking lots and stuff. And that's a young man's war because I'm trying to think of being 36 and sleeping all night in a Walmart parking lot without being blindingly drunk to help me. And I just don't see it happening right now.
And you say Walmart parking lot, I immediately think of that scene in, is it a Boogie Nights, where he's was he trying to make a couple bucks in the back of a truck? Do you
Yeah,
remember
probably.
tripping out? Something like that. Something like that.
Oh man.
God.
Okay, so dude, you know what? We've been talking about Gob, but the thing is you've been in Gob for God, what, 12 years now? 13, something like that. But you and Theo, when Tom is not playing in Sum 41, you started up another project called Theo and the Thugs. Could you tell me about the origins of Theo and the Thugs and how it was to play in that band?
Yeah, man, it was really kind of fun. We kind of because people are kind of get busy and stuff. So whenever we have an opportunity just to go out and play some shows, we're missing playing some shows. And I was visiting Vancouver one time, and
Oh, I just want to give a big shout out to my buddy Dave, who's watching us right now. What's up, Dave? He says so much gel. I'm like, well, maybe on Steven's end. I just have natural grime holding my hair on the side today.
oh man.
But anyway, okay. So Thugs, go.
Yeah, we just kind of miss playing shows. And Theo was working on some songs way back in the day, actually, even further back. I remember I was up in Canada for like a few months at one time, and we were kind of jamming, me and Theo and our buddy Larry, who's one of the drummers in the Thugs. And Theo just kind of had these songs that were kind of like some were kind of punky and some were kind of like I don't know, just like whatever. He was just like writing whatever, you know. And some are kind of fast and heavy, and some are kind of like almost like '80s kind of shit.
Really?
And we would just jam, and it was kind of fun. And it's just like back to basics. There was no real game plan back then. It was just like he had songs he was writing. Larry was a good friend, is a good friend of ours, and we just kind of all were playing playing, you know, just in a room together, like back to basics kind of shit. And then it kind of evolved into a, well, maybe let's just go out and play some songs and do a short little tour. And Gabe was down, Gob's drummer. And so we kind of just shared duty with drums, and our boy Dan from a band called The Core, who I would love for you to have on your show.
Yeah, he's the dude who has the Green Lantern band, right?
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Ah, yeah.
If there's anyone at all, I doubt it, but if there's anyone at all new listening to the Ryan Stick Show, he's a complete maniac and genius with pop culture shit, and especially nerdy stuff and geeky stuff. And Dan, as you said, has a band called The Core, and it's all based on mostly like it's a punk band, but told from the perception of the Green Lantern Corps and other kind of DC kind of shit. And I mean, they're
awesome.
And such a good guy. One of the funniest dudes I've ever met. He actually just had a birthday a couple of days ago. So happy birthday to that guy, man. And so we went out with him. He would play guitar. And yeah, it was just a fun little kind of thing, man. It's kind of like a back to basics kind of thing, you know? It was fun. It was a lot kind of smaller. The shows were more intimate. But as you know, those intimate shows can kind of have a different energy, kind of a bit more of kind of a crazy energy to them if people are more kind of packed together in smaller venues. So it was kind of cool to get back into something like that. And it was just cool to play with those guys again, to be on the stage with those dudes and the new guys, Danny and Larry. It was just cool to go out. And there's a video too. We put a video together. Theo did it was a cover of Jesus, I'm going blank. An old 80s like Canadian band. Oh, It Doesn't Really Matter. I forget who the original band was. He's gonna kill me. But there's a video. If you go to like
I'm looking for it like right now.
Yeah, that's it. I heard it in the background.
Okay, okay, it's not a video, so let me just find the video because I want to make sure because there's just a title, but I'm like, I don't know, I'm pretty sure we could do better than that. So
we cut together an old 80s cult movie, like a Canadian horror sci-fi movie starring Thor, Canadian.
Oh, here we go. Oh, Thor. Yeah. I've met Thor at the Fantasia Film Festival.
Yeah, of course you have.
He's much shorter. Hey, Bran's saying what's up. Bran is in a great band called Radiant Moon, and I'm so glad I remember. I don't remember any names of anything, but Radiant Moon is a really sick rock and roll band, and they were on the show last week.
Oh, that's rad.
Yeah, great band, actually. And it's funny, after I listened to more of his stuff after he was on the show last week, and instantly became like even more of a fan. So I'm kind of glad that didn't affect my ability to interview them, because I would have turned into Chris Farley. I would have been like, so, you know, when you did that song?
Yeah, R.I.P.
That was awesome.
Let me ask you a question about Thor. Did he bend steel for you?
He kind of did it with his mouth that night, but it was the premiere of Thor's documentary.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, that hot mess. It was great.
Did you watch it? So it was his movie, because I think he might have written and directed this movie that we cut into a video.
Okay, well, this is the movie I'm talking about. It was a documentary about his life, and it's just fucked up because Thor was saying like how he had this big record deal, but then he was kidnapped by the other record deal and held for 3 days until it was too late to sign his major label contract. Like some crazy stuff where you're like, okay. And so anyway, definitely watch the Thor movie. But here's let's watch and comment on Theo and the Thugs video. So first ever live commentary of this video.
Yeah, so the last Gob album,
yeah,
13. For each song on the album, I cut together a video from old cult movies. And
cool.
Venmo or Vimo or whatever. What's it called? I don't know. And I just wanted to do it for this song too. So it's kind of talking about the movie, and it's so bad.
So you cut it together. Multi-talented guy, dude. Awesome. Oh man, I want to act in a piece of crap so bad, dude. I don't want to be in good stuff. I just want to be in like, terrible. I want my head to be in that oven. Awesome. Wow, good production.
Right? Look at that.
No, I mean the drum sound. That's great. That's right. Theo's a genius when it comes to mics.
Yeah, he's an amazing producer, man.
It's been a hard day in the city. It affects you in the most peculiar way. A dull day don't seem pretty.
For those of you who are looking at this saying, what the hell's going on? Thor is in 70s and 80s metal Canadian icon. Or at least he thinks so. Yeah.
And he's beautiful. Look at that.
Statuesque gentleman.
So how tall is he?
Not very. Not as tall as you'd think. But that's the thing. Like, it's very rare. Like, it's not like Dwayne Johnson where when you're 6'6" and you're like that wide. Usually tall people are a little bit more stringy, and the more compact ones like Stallone, they're the really beefy ones. It's a different build, But then again, there's some huge bastards out there. Like my friend Dave is a very tall bastard, and he's it's pretty beef looking. Tough.
Okay.
This must have been a blast to cut, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just so silly. Most people have never seen it, man.
So what the fuck is this from? Like it's Thor, but what is it a movie Thor's in?
It's a movie Thor's in, and I think he wrote it, and I think he directed it.
Okay, like I need to see this movie every day of my life. And if he saved Christmas at the same time, I think my life would be complete.
Yeah, fucking that classic Canadian production.
I want to see a movie starring Thor and Thora Birch at the same time. And Chris Hemsworth. Just for good measure.
See, that was fun, man. That's about Larry playing drums, too.
Great production. Seriously, honestly, I'm blown away by how good the production is. It's really good.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds funny in the earphones because I think it's maybe filtered through whatever the fuck.
Yeah. I think it's just dividing the sound as much as they can or whatever, but people are hearing it. And if they're not, they're hearing us. Man, this is funny. Okay, so on Stranger Radio, the extended equivalent of this show right now, everybody, I'm going to describe to you what I'm seeing. I'm actually feeling bad for the monster that Thor is about to destroy because of the sympathetic eyes. And now Thor's eyes are way more evil than that poor ET fuck on screen. So
yeah, he's evoking a spirit in that shot.
Okay. It kind of looks like Vince Neil if he had the super soldier serum.
Yeah. Man, whoever's listening, if they can tell me what's the original band that did this song, I feel fucking stupid. I can't remember.
It's great. It's awesome.
That
was awesome. Cool, dude.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. Awesome.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. So, yeah, dude, that was great. And later on in the show, we'll play the Gob video, Walking Alone, because that's like a different type of, sorry, that's like a whole different thing. Like the last Gob album, like the story of producing the last Gob album, actually, when I say last now, I mean final, but I mean most recent, which was still a few years ago. Can you tell me a little bit about the story of the production and the trials and I can't think of the expression right now. Long story short, it took a very long time to come out. And can you tell me the stories of why? Because I recall it being very interesting.
The Apartment 13 one?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was kind of done differently than a lot of the other ones. Back in the day, everyone was kind of living in the same city. so there was even moments where they would live in the same house and write and record and kind of do pre-production that way. With Apartment 13, though, Tommy's had been living in New York for some time, and he's still here, but he was there for some time. So he kind of brought those songs to everyone, almost all the way kind of done. Just wrote these kind of demos. He wrote like a bunch of demos, and he writes quite a bit. So he brought all these songs in, and we just kind of had the idea just to listen to them, all of them together. Some of them didn't really have lyrics yet, so he would like sing along or play the guitar and sing along, and we kind of rated them. From what I remember, we kind of just like rated them like out of like 5 stars, like 4.5, 3 stars, and we just kind of took all of our ratings, and picked like the top 12, and then just redid those ones. And again, we were we all were staying in the same house when we recorded that. So it was me. Some shit was going down too, if I'm remembering it right. I think, not to talk out of school, but I think there might have been like a divorce happening and a couple breakups. So we all kind of ended up living in the same house together when we first started recording, and it's kind of like learning the songs. And it was in a place called White Rock, British Columbia, which is like a beautiful small beach town, like right on the border of the American border by Blaine, Washington. So we were kind of right on the water. So it's kind of an amazing time because we were all staying at that house, or 3 of us were, and we'd wake up and we'd go for a walk and we'd go get tea and then walk back and start working on the music. And it took a long time because we kind of were doing that, learning the songs and then recording them. Theo then moved to Thunder Bay for a bit and kind of helped start a business out there, and was kind of doing that quite heavily with his lady at the time, and really just helping out her family with starting this business. And he was kind of like really heavy-handed with the work and the help. And then eventually moved back to Vancouver. I was like, fuck, we finished it up. So it's kind of a long process. Man, also we didn't have, might have been the first time where Gob didn't really have a manager or a label. And usually those are the people that crack the whip with time and tell you, there's got to be a finish line, and you have to tell us the finish line. And then when you have that line, it kind of helps you fuel a little bit with your time management. And when it's just, 4 kind of dudes left to their own with no one cracking that whip, we kind of just took all the time that we did.
I know, man. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm like, last year, like last April, I feverishly wrote 5 songs. I recorded a quarter of them in a quarter way, and then immediately lost interest and haven't picked it up again. And had I just completed it, there would have been at least 4 songs existing in the world. So without that kind of like cracking the whip, especially I was recording for me, so I didn't even have the pressure of other people to be like, finish it up, dude. So it's hard, man. And the fact that you guys got it out, that's awesome. But I noticed it's a much darker Gob album, and I don't mean like in heavy, I mean in tone. Tom sings a different way, even sings like low, like Morrissey load sometimes, and just I don't know, there's an 80s vibe to it, and I know you love it, that kind of dark 80s music. So did you have a hand in any of that when it came to those vibes that I was hearing?
Honestly, I didn't, man. That's just Tommy, and I think I hear what you're saying, but it wasn't too noticeable to us because I think it's easy being a fan of tons of bands. It's easy to see changes because you kind of are listening to their songs quite a bit or once in a while. And then when they have the new stuff, you're directly just comparing it to the stuff that you're just hearing. And I think that's what makes it easier to A and B a sound. But when it's been, because they started like 25 years ago, like it's been a minute for them being a band. So I think with them, that A and B doesn't really happen. There's nothing to really compare it to. It's just kind of what you're feeling and what you kind of put out when you pick up a guitar. So I think it's just also what your influences are. Cause 25 years later, we were talking kind of before we went on the air, and who we were 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Eyes of like, imagine our girlfriends or wives, 20 years ago. It's just, we were, not to be cheesy, but quite different people, man. So your influences, and that's all we really are. Like, not to be, again, fucking cheesy, but we're all just an accumulation of our influences, I think, and it's just how much we can camouflage that or dig into it or work through that to bring something out new from it. It's still an accumulation of our influences. So I think at that time, Tommy was listening to a lot of, I think you can hear some kind of like 70s kind of rock, and maybe that's what you're hearing too. You know, there's kind of like some 70s kind of rock riffs going on in there. And there's always that 80s. I mean, we're kids of the 80s, you know?
Oh,
So that's
God, yeah.
Yeah, as you know, as I can tell by like our backdrop around when it's that 2-shot of us.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, you sent me this in the mail. I was like, and it was like in the middle of when COVID was really crazy. So when we get a package at the house, we hear a knock at the door and go to the door and go, and we find this package. We're like, did you fucking order this? No, I didn't fucking order this. And no, we bring it in the kitchen and like act like it's a bomb. When it's like super COVID time, we're like opening it up with gloves and we're like, oh, it's a Stranger Radio banner. Awesome.
That was a huge, I think I sent that as a huge thank you because your lovely lady Mel, who also has a show on Stranger Radio, did some voiceover work for, was it for Jesse's birthday? I made that video of Bernie Sanders talking to like those goth rock punks.
Oh, that's what that was for. Cool. Yeah. And what's funny is like Melissa's just the most talented human in the world. So when we're originally both going to do the voice and stuff, and I'm like, Mel, what the hell does Bernie Sanders even sound like? And then she proceeded to Bernie Sanders, and I'm like, oh, okay. Push to record. She got that in one take, and I'm like, okay, Mel, what the hell does Regis Philbin sound like? And she's like,
right.
Oh, like this. And I'm like, oh, okay. So then again, I'm just like, well, like, what? Am I going to redo her stuff and do shittier versions of her stuff, or just leave this lightning in the bottle as it is? And yeah, she did.
Regis, man, that might have been before he passed too. God damn. Love Regis. Love Regis. Let's hear it in the chat.
Oh, hey, Paul from Without Will says, remember when Without Will opened for Gob in 2012? Paul, that's the first night I met Steven. Yeah, Without Will were your opening band that night.
Okay.
And yeah, it was Paul is a great guy, and he has a new band called the Pivot Tones that are like the Beach Boys meets more like I don't want to say, if I say it the Beach Boys like the Ramones, people are like, oh, like the Riverdales and the Queers, and I'm like, yeah, they kind of lend themselves to Beach Boys-ish stuff, but the Pivot Tones specialize in that wall of harmony that you hear in Beach Boys. And I think you'd really like them, Steven, actually. So I'm going to send you some links afterwards because
being honest, man, I don't remember that show, but I remember meeting you after the show.
Yeah.
Clear as day. I don't really remember the show, but I remember meeting you. And I forgive me if you heard the story before, because I think I told it maybe once before, but who remembers nothing? But whenever we would do any kind of interview, whenever we're on tour doing interviews, we'd never do them after a show because we'll always have like a couple of drinks, and interviews are just usually messy and boring and dumb when people are drunk in them, and listening to drunk people, I find it fucking horrible and boring. So there's a reason why we do that. So on that whole tour, we never did any interview after a show except for yours, and I'm thankful for it because it loosened everyone up. But what I remember, not just being kind of looser because it was after a show, so it had a completely different vibe. And it's the first time meeting you. And what was dope was you interviewed each of us differently, and people always kind of ask the same things because, of course, you do. Because just what are you going to ask a fucking pop punk band, But what you did was rad. After standard kind of interview questions, you went into like what your show, the Ryan Stick Show, kind of specializes in, and what I think you specialize in, and where you truly shine is like your pop culture, nerdy. You even started, I remember clear as day, you even started it with like, is there a difference between nerd and geek? And like, what is it? Or what's the difference between nerd and geek? And I remember debating about it. And I remember we got people in the background that work where the green room was also like their office. And I remember we got them in on the debate. They're like chiming in with like, who's a geek and who's a nerd. And it was dope. And then I remember you asked me out of nowhere about not knowing anything about me or what my interest is. You asked me who the best Robin is. And just the fact that you assumed, because most people might to know one Robin's real name, and the
Yeah.
fact that you knew of the multiple Robins. And then when I came back with Damian Wayne, that got us into a whole different discussion. And I was like, okay, this is a dope dude right here.
Yeah.
It's like an interview that it can just like keep. This is just a conversation now. It's just like, because you turned. I think what you're really good at is you turn people. I mean, who's to say who's interesting, but what you do, and I think what makes you great is you make people interested with a question like that. Because you probably felt with that nerdy geek debate we're having, I think you felt that there's something here. So you kind of turned it in a way and pivoted where you made someone that you're asking questions about into like a conversation. And all of a sudden, instead of trying to find out if they're interesting, and God knows none of us are fucking really interesting, but
Yeah, you are.
you made us interested in talking to you about something that we're into. And I think that's what kind of, I mean, that was 2012. And I think that might be the birth of like podcasts. What makes podcasts great, maybe just the great ones, is when you listen to someone that's interested in something, that's what makes something interesting. You know, it's not you don't have to listen to an expert talk about some shit or any kind of like someone with a doctorate in any kind of fucking subject, but it's someone that has like an interest in a subject. And if you are down with that subject too, that's what makes something worth your time to listen to, I think. And that's what makes that interview. I can't remember any other interview that I did that full tour.
Yeah.
But fucking Who's Your Favorite Robin is etched in my mind.
Yeah, but then we got into this excited like conversation where we just started talking about everything, because clearly it's back then, just as many moons ago, kids, the MCU really wasn't what it was yet. So we were finding kindred spirits and being able to talk to people in bands where not every other person was talking about the new Iron Man or Captain America movie. So it was still interesting to find people who were interested in it, because it's not nowadays like every fourth person probably has seen Avengers Endgame, but you know, back then it was still kind of on the cusp of obscurity. Browntown says Damien. By the way, also the also who you think's the best Robin is. Steven, I don't remember. Who do you think is the best Robin? Because it's
Damian Wayne.
Yeah, Damien.
I mean, that's I'm not gonna say best, but my favorite's Damian Wayne, because it flipped the personalities. Because not to get fucking nerdy, but who gives a fuck? This is the Ryan Stick Show, people. So if you don't care, it doesn't matter. But how he flipped the script with when Bruce died and Dick came on to be the new Bats, and all of a sudden Batman was kind of the lighthearted one, and Damien was like this like focused fucking ultimately like a killer. That was like the kind of the dark one, and he's so like cool. He's like a 10-year-old kid, and now Batman's trying to be like the lighthearted one. That flip was interesting to me, because it's been since 1940 whatever that it had never been that way. So for them to flip it and to make it a child that grew up in, like, you know, the harshest of conditions, and just not understanding why someone just isn't ending evil by taking their life and letting them keep doing evil, and having that kind of voice that people kind of have when they maybe read those books through like an 11-year-old's voice who's just bad as fuck. Was dope.
And maybe that's why that iteration of Batman and Robin works so much better than Jason Todd and Bruce originally, because Jason Todd was this, you know, snot with a violent attitude that arguably you could say that about Damien too, but with Jason, you were still with a hardcore focused Bruce who wasn't trying to be lighthearted. So that comparison you're talking about is great. And that's one of the strengths that Grant Morrison can do, because he could take characters that are already established. And in this case, he put the cowl on Grayson. But even so, what he does with Animal Man, what he does with all these obscure, forgotten 80s characters pre-Crisis on Infinite Earths, it's just astounding how he has love for everyone. And even in Animal Man, he shows like all these multiple dimensions of forgotten characters, and they're all like, hey, we existed, and you're trying to forget us, but we're here, damn it. And I think it's just beautiful. We got now Natalie says something really nice. She says, Ryan also does his research and knows so much information about the person he interviews. Natalie, that is not always the case. For instance, you that first time. But in general, yes, I always try to know a lot about them. But if I'm interviewing them, it's pretty much sometimes because I just adore whoever I'm talking to. And in other cases, with my friend Bran last week, I was getting to know him as we were on the air, and that's a beautiful thing too. Steven, even though you did not play on this album, I think you still know all this inside information. Question for Steven: first off, The World According to Gob is a masterpiece, front to back. I agree. I'd like to know more about the writing process behind For This Moment. I love religious wordplay and was always trying to dig in what it actually means. When I used to, when it's usually a stab at the organized religion, but in this song, I sense it's a different angle. Care to share your thoughts? Now, you know Tom, and you've asked him questions. Has Tom ever mentioned anything about the writing of that song?
I've never. You know what?
Text him now. Let's find this out.
You know what? I never would, and I've never asked him anything about his lyrics, man. And man, it's hard not to be cheesy on this shit, but I always think it's best to leave that. You know, David Lynch kind of talks about that a lot. It's best to never answer. I mean, much love to the question, but it's. I always think it's best to never answer that kind of stuff because it's I think it can take away. And again, this fucking sounds like hippie fucking shit, man. But it can take away, I think, what that means.
That's because it does sound like hippie fucking shit. But whatever. Peace, brother.
Drinking mushroom tea. But yeah, I mean, that guy has a good handle on it, I think. But I've never asked him. I mean, I kind of wanted to ask him once, like, who's Ellen in Oh Ellen? But I've never asked him shit, man. Some things kind of come up, there's some songs that come up naturally just through getting to know someone, like we're talking about those 23 hours in a van and talking
down by the river. Sorry. To throw that in. We've been watching a lot of Matt Foley. All right, please continue. So there's a lot you can learn about people 23 hours in a van.
That's a second Farley reference.
Yep.
Good.
Oh yeah. This won't be the last.
R.I.P. R.I.P. Oh man. But yeah, I've never asked him, to be honest, man. I know with that album, if I remember right, we're talking about when Tommy lived in Vancouver. I think that was the album when the guys were actually living in a house together in Vancouver and doing pre-production, which just means kind of jamming out songs and working through ideas together. And I think that's how that one was done. And I remember visiting those guys. I think the first time I met those guys is when they were recording that album. And why I remember it, I think, is because the dude that produced that record, the producer of that record worked on Smiths. I'm a big Smiths fan and Morrissey fan. And I think that guy worked as an engineer or something on Smith's records, and I think he might have did something with like maybe Jawbreaker albums or something. I could be making this shit up. Wikipedia might know more, but
Wikipedia makes up a lot of shit too, dude. Okay.
I mean, look at mine. It's just lies. But I remember meeting an old English guy, and I remember that the guy I was with actually was a singer of Thread, the band that the guys went on to produce years later. Was like, this guy worked with Morrissey. I'm like, fuck, I'm meeting someone that like met Morrissey. This is before we knew Morrissey was like a total piece of shit.
Okay.
Fuck, but back then, whatever year that was it 2002? Or that was an amazing thing.
Sometimes mystique goes a long way. It keeps your career, the longevity of your career, if no one knows what a piece of crap you are. But back in the day, man, people had legions of lawyers and bodyguards making sure the public didn't it's funny, my mom tells me, she's like, I watched your feed, your hair's always in your eyes, and right now I want to remove my hair from my eyes, but I don't want to prove her right, so I'm just going to let this happen.
That's sweet. Are you eating enough?
Yeah, my buddy Steven, he not you but another one who goes by Steve O in Australia. He's in a band called Area 7, and he was telling us his best friend is the lead singer of The Living End. the guitar player, and he was telling me when Green Day toured Australia, they brought the Living End, sent them a T-shirt and a demo tape, and they brought him out as their opening band on the Insomniac tour, which is a crazy time to be the opening band for Green Day, who are taking over the world, but still are like 24, 5 years old, full of piss and vinegar, just, party, especially Trey Cool. And he was telling me about the after party hangouts they would do. And at one point, Trey Cool, who had this guy, a tall guy in a trench coat, following him around at all times with wads of hundreds to prevent Trey Cool from getting in said trouble. And Trey's like, hey, we need this vending machine. So he convinces all 8 of them to walk over to this vending machine, unplug it, and try to proceed to rip it out of the wall. And this guy comes and says, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? And the tall guy emerges from the shadows just with like a wad of hundreds and just like passing them, counting, all right, how much?
Wow.
for Trey Cool control. So, yeah. Oh, man. Back in the day, pre-cell phones. I mean, if you're going to look, like, if you're going to inappropriately touch someone, not cool. If you're going to try to steal a vending machine, whatever. Van Halen.
I bought those guys weed one time. It was maybe like, I don't know, over 20 years ago. And I was.
Which guys?
The Green Day guys.
Nice. Okay. Oh, you bought the Green Day guys weed. Okay. No, that's not just something that you're like, oh yeah, I bought the Green Day guys weed. Steven, that is the title of this episode. Please tell me how you bought Green Day weed. Okay. They are my Morency, but they're not pieces of shit. So please continue.
They, I mean, if I'm remembering it right, there was a show. If you remember, to anyone listening in America and Canada, our MTV was called Much Music.
Yeah.
And there was like a sister show that was even dumber called like Much More Music. Remember that? Which was maybe more adult.
Yeah. And
on that channel, there was the Chris Isaak show. Do you remember that?
No.
Chris Isaak had like his own TV show where he just played Chris Isaak. It was actually kind of cool. I remember I liked it. I thought it was whatever, if I'm remembering this right. And they were, I think, doing a cameo on the Chris Isaak. I mean, I'm just piecing this shit. I haven't thought about this in 20 years, but I think they're in Vancouver, maybe shooting that show. And someone I knew on set was like working it. And I think it was Trey Cool wanted to buy a whole bunch of weed, like a large amount. And she called me and asked me if I could get like a large amount of weed quickly. And I was like, yeah, for sure. So I went and bought a bunch of weed and then brought it home. And then I didn't meet Trey, but she came up and gave it to Trey Cool. Yeah.
Funny story about CJ Ramone. I just remember my only interaction with CJ Ramone ever, which involves weed, which is why I'm bringing it up, is that he was playing Fuffoons. And my friend's band, they were called Chicks and Dicks back in the day, like Chicks X and then N Dicks, because there was 2 guys, 2 girls. Very witty name. Anyway, they were opening up, and I remember like CJ Ramone like wanted weed, and my friend asked me, "Oh, can you get it? Do you know anyone who can get him weed?" And I'm like, without naming a name of person because it's the internet, I'm like, yes, I do. Yes, I do know how. I know exactly, and I love doing that. I love like just being able to point in a direction or whatever. But long story short, they all ended up getting people ended up getting a photo op with CJ Ramone, which was really cool. But before that happened, CJ was telling me about, I always asked him, I'm like, dude, I love the fact that you, Daniel Ray, who produced the last few Ramones albums, I love the fact that you guys play the songs at the right tempo, because all these Ramone songs have these beautiful medleys or melodies that in the later 90s, when they played everything super fast, was a little lost, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But when she done up and ready to go now, rocking high school, and I was telling him, I'm like, man, it's so awesome that you're playing it at the right speed. And he's just like, yeah, that's because Maki and Johnny wanted to get off stage fastest, so you know, we just would play everything fastest so they could leave faster. That's honestly why. And I'm like, that's why? Because I thought, I'm like, oh, you guys just want to be cool because you're on Lollapalooza and you're like, hey, young bands, look at the pioneers of punk rock. It's like, nope. They just wanted to get the hell out of there faster.
Did they play Lollapalooza?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, Ramones did Lollapalooza, yeah.
Wow.
Crazy.
Yeah. Not bad.
Yeah.
Do you remember they did? I remember we even posted that Green Day thing. They jokingly said that Gob was their biggest influence on one of their Much Music interviews. Someone actually just refound it. We posted that shit on Instagram, and we edited it so it looks like they're not really joking. I think, but obviously,
Yeah.
if you watch like the full version, they're being extremely sarcastic.
I miss them when they were sarcastic. Now they're all like, "Ooh, we're a serious band. We write Broadway songs." And I'm like, bring back the jerks. But I'm like, but at the same time, we were talking about who the hell were you 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Same thing with them. You know,
man, when
same
you're
thing.
Yeah. You become dads and you're, middle age. It's all different, man. Those first albums though, I still love, man. On my show on Stranger Radio, I'll still play shit from Kerplunk, and I still love it. I used to, when I was a little kid, like the 1039 album, I remember clearly there was a time when I was a little kid, and I'm sure everyone was like this, that there are certain songs or albums that you would listen to at night in bed with like your headphones on. And I remember like Christie Road was the first time I kind of heard like a punk band kind of do like a ballad, and that meant a lot to me. And I remember Danzig did a song,
Love and Tears.
Blood and Tears.
Blood and Tears, yeah.
Yeah.
Blood and Tears.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful.
Dude.
Love it. Yeah.
And that, yeah, so it was just for that band to even know of a band that I play in it's amazing for sure.
Oh my God, Blood and Tears, Danzig 2 in general. Like, I'm a big Danzig fan, okay? Like, I'm aware he's kind of like, he is who he is as a person, but I always can separate the work from the jerk, like, unless it's something very bad. Like, I'm not popping on the Cosby Show. That's not happening again.
No.
But when it comes to Danzig and his singing, I'm just like, man, Danzig 1 and 2 are just this time in his career. Because Danzig 3 is still good, but it's just more of 2.
Yeah.
But Danzig 2 is when they found their sound. Like Danzig 1's good, but Danzig 2 starts off of long way back from hell, and I'm like, oh my God, just what a way to enter an album. Like, and everybody was on point. Like Chuck Biscuits and John Christ on guitar, just everything worked. Eerie Vaughn's bass, like, oh my God, like that's when Danzig felt like a band to me, and not just Danzig and his amazing friends or something.
Yeah, that's a good call. And another cool thing, man, we probably talked about it before, but when you and your lovely lady were visiting New York, was it last year?
Oh yeah,
it was around Halloween, and we ended up going to see the Misfits with Danzig.
Because of you.
Yeah, well,
because of you. Dude, we did not have the money for it, man. We were there to see Beetlejuice the night before. Called you, was around the corner from your house by a fluke. But had we not spent all afternoon with you and not taken the subway with you there, because our hotel was like 20 minutes away from there, we're like literally going to drop Steven off and just walk back. You're like, hey man, well, I don't know, maybe you could find a scalper. I mean, they're right over there. And you pointed me to somebody. And I like literally bought the ticket because you pointed at them, and I'm sure people have heard the story before, but just in case you haven't, basically I go up to the scalper and I say in my head, I'm like, online these things cost $200 a piece or $180 a piece. I can't afford that. I have a certain amount of American money left. Not going to take out anymore because we're leaving tomorrow. Okay, what can I live with? And I'm like, I think I might be able to do 100. I'll really eat shit, but I could probably do 100 each. And I go up to the scalper and I say to him, all right, man. He's like, you want tickets? I'm like, yes, I do. And I'm like, how much? And then life slows down, 300 style. And I'm thinking, here it is, buddy. What you going to tell me? And he's just like 80 each. And I'm like, yes. Containing my excitement, in my head, I'm like,
that's so rad.
But in person, I'm just like, cool, man. And then I thought, I hope these tickets are real. So I'm like, Mel, let's get inside and make sure these tickets are real, especially before he runs away. And we're like, okay, let's go inside. But then we realized that we have like $40 worth of vegan baked goods that you took us around the east end of the East Village of New York to all these amazing little hidden places. And Melissa and I had all these baked goods, and they're like, no food in in the place. I'm like, can we check our bags? They're like, nope, no food. So we go outside and proceed to like try to eat our asses off. But we had just eaten dinner. You know, we were going on a full stomach. We're shoving all this like.
Did we have pizza?
Something like that. Yeah, we did have pizza. We're shoving all this vegan bakery in our mouths, and we go to a homeless man, and we're like, "Hey, man, would you like this stuff?" And Melissa's like, "They're vegan," and the homeless guy gives us this kind of look, like, and I'm like, "Dude, you're homeless. Take the fucking cookies." But anyway, we're outside. The Damned is playing. I think I texted you being like, "Dude, we actually got tickets." Yeah. And we go up and we're watching the show, and it's like the nosebleeds, but we don't give a fuck. I'm so happy to be there because as soon as Rancid came out and said, "We never thought we'd play Madison Square Garden," and I'm like, "That's Rancid. They've been playing 20-something years, and if they said at 25, like almost 30 years, and if they said we never thought we would play here, that is a show that you want to fucking be at because that's not just another stop on their tour. This is a monumental night." I'm like, wow, if Rancids are saying that, then Misfits really must fucking think that because this is like the big stadium in their backyard.
Yeah.
So
it's where it would have been growing up in Jersey. It would have been just a fucking dream. I remember there's even places in my hometown that are like tiny that were like dreams to play when you play certain venues. It's where you go and you see bands that you love and you're like, as a kid or even as an adult, any kind of whatever the fuck, and just being able to be on the same, it's a fucking cheeseball fest tonight, but there's something so rad about sharing a stage with a band that you loved. So imagine being from like Jersey and then all of a sudden you're playing Madison Square Gardens and 40 years later, and hearing Danzig say that too, and Rancid too, is amazing. Like they still fucking killed it, man. I remember seeing them. I remember I did a tour with a band called the Black Halos back in the day. Just
I know Black Halos. Yeah, great.
And we did like a Warped tour. It was back in the maybe late 90s, and it was like a Warped tour before it kind of went like more screamo, and it was kind of like Rancid was on it and AFI were on it, and the Stillers and shit, and it was just such a rad thing to see Rancid back then just fucking kill it and just be dope dudes. Like back then, I don't know how the Warped tour changed, but back then you would all eat together and break bread together and shit. And
Browntown's funny. We're referring to the state, Melissa and I gorging on vegan goods outside homeless standards.
Browntown is a huge Punk's dad listener.
Nice.
Is that in Browntown that I see on Punk's dad shows?
Yeah.
Is he in Australia? Is that right? Brown Sound. What's it? So what is it?
Browntown. Yeah.
Yeah, I think are you Australian?
Let us know in the comments below.
Let us know in the chat.
What continent you reside on. But yeah, man. Okay, so Steven, you've been in Gob for like 13, 14, 500 years. But you guys have played some really cool big shows opening up for other people. You've played some big shows being Gob. What's a show that really just like blew you away by being at? Because I've seen some of the flyers where who you were opening with, and I remember like you were opening up for someone huge and like a huge venue. I wanted to message you and say, bro, can you list me or something? Jesus, I'll drive there. It was somewhere in Canada. It was like a really big venue or something.
Yeah, I mean, they're all always somewhere in Canada. It might have been was like that Motley Crue, the festival with like Motley Crue and like
Brown Taz says I'm in CA.
Okay, sorry, Browntown. But that's the Browntown from Punk's dad, right? Sorry, buddy. I thought you were the Australian guy. You know what show really sticks out to me? I mean, maybe you're thinking that Motley Crue festival-y thing. But those never really feel that like you're playing with the band because it's like a festival. So it's not like, I mean, Warped Tour is different because you kind of were always kind of around and it was an everyday kind of thing. And they'd always switch the time slots with that Black Halos run that I was on. But one show that stands out, and for kind of dumb reasons, is we played a festival and I think the headlining band, this is in Quebec where you are, and one of the headlining bands was a cover band. We played with No Effects, But the band that headlined over No Effects, and of course us, was a cover band. It was an AC/DC cover band, and it was such an eye opener. And
Oh, this was Rockfest, right?
is this old news to you? That in Quebec, cover bands are almost as big as the original bands. And
Was it Rockfest though?
Yeah, is that Plains of Abraham?
Maybe. You know what? I'm just remembering, like, at the end of the night, it's not that they're headlining, it's just that they put it at a big festival like that. They put the headlining bands last because no one wants to play that late. And it's just pretty much that last band to get drunk to before going to sleep to go festival the next day.
There was
something.
It's like 40,000 people or whatever. And I remember people going nuts. I'm like, I just remember thinking, this isn't AC/DC. Like, this is like a pub band. I mean, I'm sure they're amazing musicians and probably good guys or whatever the fuck. But like, there's 40,000 people going nuts for like a cover band. I remember thinking, man, Quebec is so strange. Like, these guys, I don't know. Maybe I don't have enough respect for cover bands, but that blew me away. That sticks in my memories as being so strange. It was one of our biggest shows. That Motley Crue festival was massive too. But the weird thing is, man, and you know, once it's like with those festival shows, once it gets past like 6,000 people, 7,000 people, it doesn't matter if it's 7,000 or 40,000. I think that Motley Crue one was like 70,000 tickets. It doesn't even matter because you can only see kind of so far. And then past that, it's just whatever. And those shows always sound so like whatever. But to be honest, and we were kind of talking about this before the show went live, is those shows, I mean, they sound cool and like the photos of them always look dope and stuff, but playing them, it has such a vacancy to it when you compare it to a show with like, say, 700 people in a venue where people are shoulder to shoulder and everyone there is about a ticket to kind of see your band and they're singing along and everyone's just kind of having fun. That energy to that is far more, there's such a different vibe, or just a vibe, period. Those massive shows, I mean, you can't even spit on the person in the front row. They're so far away from you. And when you can't, and again, cheeseball night, but when you can't feel like an energy or any kind of excitement from someone, you're just on this like stage that's too massive, especially for a band like us, that you're just like running around on. And it's, it can feel kind of silly. And everyone's just kind of like watching
the screen.
There's huge monitors or screens. And everyone's kind of like watching that because they're so far away. So like they're like watching a video of something that they're at, and it's a weird thing, man.
Or they're watching their lives through their phones, and they're like, "What are you going to upload? This shitty sounding, like shaky cam video that is a terrible representation of what you're seeing?"
Yeah, you're never going to watch that again. Like, just watch the fucking show you're at. But I mean, I've been into shows like that, and they'll sometimes blow me away. I remember, maybe like 15 years ago, I went to a Coachella that Prince played. It was like Kraftwerk and Portishead and Prince and The Verve. And I remember I was in one of those massive audiences, and that was still special seeing bands like that. But those are kind of like real, like God, I really love God, but like seeing Prince and like fucking Portishead, that was like some special fucking shit, man.
For sure. And that's why we brought up how the Garden was so important, because here the Garden exactly isn't playing someone's backyard. You know, the Garden is like one of the most famous venues in the world, and you're seeing one of the most famous punk bands of all time kind of like be giddy as kids to be there just as much as you are, to see a lineup that everybody was just as impossible as seeing Axl and Slash and Duff on the same stage again. So
what's special about that is the whole, I mean, it's a cliche, but the Garden, there's something special about Madison Square Garden, and I think it is one of the best venues in the world to see a band at that stage. But what made that so rad, and you can contest this because you were there too, and it's different than the festival, because festival will have a kind of a mosh podge of fans for the most part. But seeing the Misfits at the Garden around Halloween especially, is every single person in that audience was there to see the Misfits, and every single person in that audience was singing along. So it kind of gave the energy I was speaking of, like those smaller shows, like 600 people, when it's packed, when it's shoulder to shoulder, just heavy duty fans And no Misfits have like the craziest fans. Like, do you remember like the demographic of the people at that show? It was like such a crazy age, generational. Like there was grandparents, parents, kids at that show, and it was like old school punk rockers and like kind of like crusty punks and like people that, you know, like businessmen now, but grew up with that band because like they're, you know, the Misfits are like the U2 of spooky punk. They, you know, there's such a broad spectrum of like spooky punk. They're truly, you know, and he killed it, man. So
Yeah, and Danzig sang great that night. I've seen Danzig live many times. And no offense, Glenn, you'll never see this, but sometimes he doesn't sound like that. And and that night he hit every note. There wasn't like the whole like, whoa, like every time it's time for the high note, he didn't put the mic away. Like you heard everything, and I'm like, wow, you're singing your ass off, buddy. Good for you. And the band sounded good, and the drummer was great. And I'm like, I've seen different iterations of the Misfits to varying degrees of quality. And I'm like, if I never see the Misfits again, I'm good because I saw that, you know, the soul, the 15-year-old that first played that tape that his uncle gave him said, I did it, you know, took 21 years, but I did it. Yeah. And 25 at that point. Hey, we got more comments. Oh, and Browntown said, I'm also a big Ryan Stick fan. Wink, wink. Sarcasm's appreciated on this show.
Oh,
and also so are endangered species.
I read it flirting, Ryan. I didn't see that as sarcasm.
Browntown said, I remember being backstage to This Ain't No Picnic, and it was like night and day, loud party in front of the stage, catered private lunch in the back. Yeah, it's sometimes that's what it is, because like the artists that we all know and love, we all want to think that we're in Motley Crue the Dirt, but a lot of the times backstage there's really not much going on. Like with in some cases at Gob shows, there's me talking about Batman and Superman to 4 grown men for about an hour, and you know, and having some beers. That was a fun night though, but it wasn't fun like yeah, let's light our nipples on fire. It's more like, oh my god, we're having so much fun, let's talk about Star Wars with Tom from Gob.
You know, I got distracted because he said catered, and that was my childhood name for a penis on boys was cater.
So Steven, you're a proud vegan man, and I'm noticing at all the punk festivals and stuff like that, you know, you've also been in the business a long time. Do you feel and notice that there are so much more vegan options in catering than there used to be, let's say even 10, 15 years ago?
Yeah, for sure. But it just makes sense, right? It just makes sense. I mean, my mind kind of goes into the thought of like, I don't think it's about people are realizing about the suffering of sentient beings. I think it's that people just want to make money, man. And so if less people are eating meat, or if people nowadays, if they get sick and if they're older, a lot of times doctors will tell them, hey, don't eat red meat every day. It's just like a common thing a fucking doctor will tell people. Especially with like obesity and heart problems that people have, especially in this country, in America, like a main cause of death. So I think when people want to maybe not die, they'll try to eat better, but we are old dogs, so it's hard to teach new tricks. So we want the flavors and the taste that we had as a kid. So we want shit that tastes like meat, but maybe won't damage our hearts as much. They're looking at alternatives, and then when they look at alternatives, that makes sales go up. And then when sales go up, companies want to develop more shit.
Yeah. And the longevity of performers. I mean, you look at the Mick Jaggers in the world and the guys who always took care of themselves. There's a reason why Mick Jagger is like 70 something and still walking around the stage like a teenager, but you'll see like a 50-year-old guy who's you know, from the 80s, like a 56-year-old guy who's like a whale impression of what he used to be, just kind of like slugging around on the stage, heaving and hawing, and is a kind of a ghost of the performer he once was. And it just goes to show that he didn't really, you know, once the cocaine went away and there was nothing keeping him skinny anymore, he didn't develop those habits that the lifer performers, like let's say Bruce Springsteen or even AFI kept themselves in great condition because the shows they would put on were so intense and so physical.
Mhm.
And you gotta have a lot of respect for the guys who aren't going to go party all night because they care too much about you getting your price of admission worth. You know, is it worth ruining a show for a few thousand people who waited all year to see you play, but got a shit show because you drank too much vodka the night before?
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think it's a balance of getting over anxiety of playing, because it can be still be scary to perform. So it's a balance of managing your own insecurity and fear of maybe performing, and knowing a couple of drinks can loosen you up, but maybe trying to do it more naturally or not. But also it's the older we get, and as you know, you just feel fucking horrible the next day. So if you're and the road, the life when you're on tour is such an unhealthy road, especially in Canada, because the major cities are so uh, few and far between. They're long drives. So if you're not like stocking up on any kind of healthy things and treats and little edibles, you're eating kind of horribly. So you're not getting a lot of sleep. You might be drinking because of anxiety of performance, or just meeting people. I mean, meeting people still frightens me, man. It's it just feels strange, you know? And so getting over that naturally, but it's true. It's what you said. I mean, just looking at people our age, or even the people that are listening to this, you can see now people, if you line up people that kind of maybe stopped drinking or didn't drink as much, or maybe don't eat red meat twice a day, to the people that eat a lot of veggies, or, you know, move their body in some way, or do any kind of stress management, and you line them up, you do like a line, you start seeing the difference, you know, and seeing the difference is the last part of it. Like our insides are the things that crumble first. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Our insides deteriorate before our outsides do, I think. But what the fuck do I know?
My friend Paul, he's a lead singer and founding member of a band called the Ripcords. And when I went on tour with him when I was like 23, my band Rockets Away were opening up for the Ripcords, and the singer and guitar player Rockets Away was the Ripcords bass player. So it was all one band, two bands, one van. I was doubling as the merch guy, and I learned so much from, you know, just his little tricks of the trade, because Ripcords back then had gone on tour every single year. And whenever we would eat in a pub, he'd eat nothing but fish and chips, which is like a closer step to a vegetarian option. But if I was on tour, I probably would just do the vegetarian option, for the sole reason of what he was telling me is like, listen, your stomach is not going to get fucked up by eating, like, you know, not eating the red meat every day. If you're in a van and you ate something that wasn't cooked correctly, your day is very bad.
Mm.
And I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because the whole tour, he just kept doing that. And I, of course, back then was eating whatever my arrogant self wanted to.
Yeah,
And but I came home with pneumonia. That's not why. It wasn't because of the food, but that tour was a hardcore tour. And I came home as a 23-year-old in the summer with pneumonia. That is the honest to God truth.
And speaking of food, man, your better half has a show on Strange Radio.
Yeah.
That deals in, you know, animal cruelty and recipes and all sorts of dope shit.
Zing. Sorry, Browntown said something funny too. I thought you were going to say two bands, one chord. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Melissa and Garden of Vegan. That's on every other Tuesday at 8:00. And yeah, no, Mel's awesome. She's got a great voice, and she really knows her stuff. So
she's
excellent.
awesome.
When are you going to be on? When are you going to be on Garden of Vegan, dude?
Anytime.
Awesome.
Anytime. Maybe
now I'm putting you on
maybe a Christmas edition.
Yeah.
A tofu edition.
Yeah. So, dude, I just brought up Paul Gott of the Ripcords, but do you have someone that when you were starting to go on tour, they were kind of like your Obi-Wan Kenobi and prevented you from like doing, or at least tried to prevent you from making all the silly mistakes that you want to give a shout out to right now?
That's a fucking good question, man. And someone came to mind super quick, and it's a band I don't really talk about too much. When I was when I was young, So I'm 43 in December. So when I was 16, I was in like a gothy.
Vegan, ladies and gentlemen. Wait, look at this mug. 40. How old? How old?
I'll be
40 what?
43 in December.
Yeah, there you go. I'm like, I'm 36 and I look like shit comparison to this guy. Please continue.
You look great.
Mm.
Chime in the chat. Right, great. So yeah, when I was young, I played in like a gothy kind of rock band, kind of like electronic-y. It was kind of like Ministry. And I say Ministry for those that remember Ministry. There was a guy that wrote and was in Ministry, was in our band, and had a female singer that was kind of like Susie in the band. She's vocals. And when I describe it that way, it sounds like it was kind of cool. We weren't, and I don't think we were good, but we would go on tour. And I remember being like 16 years old, going on tour, and we would tour like in America. So being like a Canadian fucking dumb kid touring in America down like the West Coast was like such a big deal. And I remember this was like a huge kind of time. I talk openly about it on my show on Stranger Radio. I had some
the Church of Steventology Thursdays.
Yeah. I had was going through drug addiction at the time, at that age. So it was a kind of a dark, shitty, messed up time. And we had a guy in our band, in my band, that was older, who actually ended up passing away. He overdosed and stuff. He kind of got into it later in the game and passed away. But at the time of being a 16-year-old, he was quite a bit older than me. I was like obviously the kid of the band. There was all these adults. And he was kind of one of those dudes. I mean, rest in peace, man. But he was one of those dudes that was kind of so. You learn later in life when someone's kind of so sad and they have no way out of feeling shitty. They can be quite mean and like horrible and cutting. And this dude was like quite of a cutting dude. And I was like a 16-year-old dumb kid, just starting this horrible fucking dumb shit that I started getting into. So I was all confused and messed up. And I remember he was just kind of like this guy that ended up passing away was just always so quite mean. And it's just how some sad people kind of try not to be sad. You later realize they just take other people down. And he was really good at it, especially to like a dumb kid. And I remember we were on tour with another band called Numb. And in that band was like this old guy. I remember back then he was maybe, and by old, I mean, he was probably my age now, but he was maybe like mid 40s, but to a 16-year-old, it seems old. And he was in a band called Images in Vogue. And that was a band in the 80s that toured with Duran Duran. They had like a hit song called Don't Mistake My Lust for Love. It's like a beautiful 80s pop song. And they did like world tours with Duran Duran. They kind of sound like Duran Duran, but more kind of gothy and a huge kind of deal to me. And now he was in this industrial band and we're on tour with him. So your question was like, do you remember like an Obi-Wan Kenobi guy? And this guy had like gray hair, long gray hair.
Wow.
He like almost like a Japanese aesthetic, like a Jedi kind of Buddhist Eastern kind of shit to him. And I remember one day after like a hard day of the gentleman that passed away just ripping into me, he kind of took me aside and he said, we just had a kind of a talk. And one thing he said was, look at who it's coming from. And it was something I never really thought about. Like, just look. Don't think. What I heard was like, don't think of the words he's saying or even how true they are or even how you're feeling. He's like, just look at who it's coming from. And I think when you examine that, you can understand the things I later learned about like the fuel of him saying horrible things. And why anyone says horrible things is always comes from like a place of sadness. I don't think anyone truly intends, to hurt. I don't think that's the first initial fuel for it. So I remember that clear as fucking day. It was in a Pizza Hut. And I remember him saying that. That always stayed with me, man. That was such a big, powerful thing. And I remember finding him like maybe 3 years ago. So
oh wow.
A lot of years later on Facebook. And he's living in Asia now, which is funny because, he had that kind of Eastern Obi-Wan vibe. And I remember telling him that story. I just like wrote that story. I told him of that guy's passing because I don't think he had known that he had overdosed and left us. And told him that story and just thanked him,
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, That's a lovely sentiment, Stephen. Thank you for telling us that.
Yeah.
By the way, yes, we are taking questions as long as they're not mean and weird. But yeah, we are taking questions. So ask away, because we're two dudes that have a lot to say about our lives. But before we talk about our lives, Wonder Woman's coming out on HBO Max. That's pretty cool.
On Christmas, buddy.
On Christmas. That's a great way to spend Christmas, actually.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, of all days when you're at home, there's going to be so many people. There's going to be so many basement folks out there that kind of need, like, you know, that happy turnaround. And it's actually kind of a family thing to do at this point, to go see superhero movies, because they've been at the top of pop culture for almost 20 years.
Mhm.
Like, there's been a major superhero release every year, no matter what, since 2002.
Yeah.
And arguably before that, before Spider-Man 1, there was X-Men. So you could even say 20 straight years now.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, what are Steven, we talked so much about the band stuff before people. Oh, do you know that means Marvel is going to release something to challenge that? Oh, Marvel is going to release something to challenge that? Yeah, absolutely. Probably. I mean, maybe that's how we'll finally see Black Widow. You know,
No,
Christmas Day 2020, best Christmas ever. Black Widow and Wonder Woman, at least $50 of subscription fees right there. But you know, cool stuff.
Contractually, they can't release Black Widow online. It has to be in the theaters, they say. But I think what their counter action, that Brown Town, will be, it'll be the Scarlet Witch. I think will come out around that time.
That's true, because they said it was going to be January, but yeah, like, what's a few weeks, right?
Mm.
All right, here's one that I have not read yet, but oh, okay. This is I think a question from me. Oh, hey Willow, what's going on? This is really random, but do you ever record or public? Will you ever record the song Gingerbread Tan? I need to know. I need this song on my Christmas playlist. Haha. Steven, you've collaborated on that song at Crowbar, right? No, Steven's never played with me, actually. Steven and I have never shared a stage, although we both rocked the mic. We've rocked these mics a few times, but we've never rocked the stage. But I would love to have opened. I opened for Gob the tour before you joined, actually, and it would have been great, because I got a weird, like, Tyson. He's a great guy, but I didn't gel with him. You know what I mean? I'm like, hi, nice to meet you. He's like, yes, and then that was it.
That's fucking lame.
Yeah, but Gingerbread Tan's a song that my Christmas band does. That is kind of like an old bluesy type of tune, and it's about being pale. So okay. Melissa came up with the idea of a song called Gingerbread Tan, and I rolled with it. Yeah.
Say hi to her for me.
I will do. But about your songs and your bass, you played in so many bands, but you told me years ago something fascinating, that you used to live above the Cobalt in Canada. Now, the Cobalt, everybody, is a notorious and legendary bar in Vancouver. And it's kind of like, people think Fuffoons, but more tougher. It was definitely the Cobalt. And I played the Cobalt once to a bunch of we were opening up for the Ripcords, but we were more of a poppier punk band. And people were kind of just skateboarding through our set and almost on our stage as we played. And I kind of was like, I wish we were playing some rec center in front of like 15 kids, as opposed to a half full room of people who just did not want to hear anything except hardcore punk music. But the Cobalt's this tough place, and I used to live above it, which I commend you. But I just wondering, how did you live above the Cobalt?
Oh man, that was the probably in addiction. People talk about a bottom.
Oh no!
And
you don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, buddy.
No, man, it's an open book, man. Some people will even bounce along a bottom. People that maybe tune in or listening, or have family members I mean, that kind of shit touches everyone's life, I think, you know? And some people just don't hit a bottom and rise up. Some people can bounce along it. And when I label, I was speaking before when I was like a teenager and was struggling with like heroin addiction. If I was to point at a bottom, it would be the cobalt time. And I didn't live there like full on because I didn't have the money at the time. But if I had a little extra money, this is like in the mid 90s, I guess. So it was a horrible, horrible place. And if I had some extra cash, there was kind of like a little crew of us. And if one of us had a little extra money on top of getting what you needed to not be sick that day, we could get like a room at the Cobalt. And it was such a horrible place. I remember my room. So they were just like these tiny little rooms with a cot in it and a sink and like a bar, the kind of tables that are in horrible bars, like really bottom heavy tables that you stand at. And I remember my door wouldn't always lock. So I'd always put my table against the door because you would hear people's doors getting kicked in sometimes through the night.
Oh my God.
And I remember there was like a courtyard in the middle. So like your window opened up to like a courtyard and mine kind of kitty cornered the bathroom. So I would hear the things you would hear in a place where there's mental illness and kind of homeless people that got enough that day to get like a bed using the toilet. What I would hear. And it was such a dark time, man. That Cobalt. And I remember I was trying to like get clean so hard at the time. And I was trying to call detoxes because back then there was no cell phone. So I every like couple hours I go to the payphone and I would try to get into like this detox. And I remember I was trying to tell, it was at the time in addiction where like your family's kind of like, they learn that they just have to kind of cut you off to allow you to hit bottom. And hopefully you can bounce back and not get lost to it. And I remember I would call this like detox. And then I remember calling like my dad being, hey, I'm trying to get into this detox. And he's like, okay, let me know if you get in. And I never got in. And I remember, some time went by and then like my grandfather died. So I ended up kind of going to that funeral, which kind of made me have to kind of go, and my folks let me come home and clean up and, but kind of together enough to go to the funeral. And then, that's where I met my uncle, and he kind of told me about this place that got him, he kind of had some issues that I got him clean. And he like flew me to like this tiny little island where I eventually got clean. And it was all because of like that funeral and them kind of letting me home. And it was at that time where I was hesitantly living at that fucking place, the Cobalt. I remember even like selling gear. There was like a sound guy there. And I remember I had a couple things left over from that goth band that I was in, like little guitar effects processors, like bullshit things that I could get, $20 for, $50 for. And I remember bringing them down and selling them to like the sound guy, in the daytime as he's like mixing shit for strippers or whatever, I'm like, I got this guitar effects processor. It's like, I don't really need that. I'm like, well, what would you give me? And just,
dude,
there's a horrible.
You gotta write a book, dude. Like, come on. What you just described to me was more interesting than a million little pieces. I won't go all Oprah on you because you're telling the truth.
Car.
Yeah, exactly. But man, that's absolutely nuts. But it just goes to show, it's like we like to define people by their actions, or we live in cancel culture where like you said this 30 years ago. It's just like I look at every 10 years as that other chapter in your life, that other era. And I'm trying to imagine the Steven I'm talking to that I've known for going on a few years here, quite a few years. And I'm trying to imagine him doing any of that stuff you're talking about. And it seems to me like you're talking about another guy, you're talking about some other person that I've never met. And it's kind of, and that's amusing because it's like, it just goes to show, like, when you meet somebody, are you meeting who they were for the last 30 something 40 years of their life, or are you meeting the person they are this minute? And the answer is you're meeting who they are now. and who they are now kind of matters, you know? And yeah, so that's an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing that, because you know, showing warts and all on the internet these days, it's kind of a messy subject. But yeah, Steven, I'm really glad that things have gone this way, because now you live in this a beautiful apartment, or you live in New York City, and you're a fascinating gentleman who knows his pop culture. Now riddle me this, Steven.
Yeah.
Let's go before you're a teenager in a goth band that toured the States. By the way, awesome. Tell me about the young Steven that discovered comic books for the first time. Do you remember your first book?
Yeah, it kind of came through.
Oh, by the way, ask anything, guys. Anything you want, whatever. Even if it's me, I'm just not going to read it. Or if it is, I'll spin it. That's what I can do. I take tomatoes that are being thrown at my face, and I touch them, I grab them, and I bite into them.
What happened? Did we miss a question?
No. Just I think someone just is unsure if they should ask one or not. Anyhow, so your first comic book, how does it come?
It kind of came through. Man, that's a great question. But it kind of came through. I had a love, like every kid has a love of cartoons, but I always had an interest of, like, I remember going to Disneyland when we were a kid, and I always have a fascination of how things kind of work, I think. And I remember going where we were kind of staying had this kind of gallery in it. And in the gallery had Chuck Jones's, or was it Chuck Jones? It was someone's original cell artwork. And it was kind of like it kind of showed you how those cartoons were made, and they're like the paintings on the clear cellophane, and they were framed in like a gallery, like professionally lit. And the aesthetic was so like clean and like peaceful, and it was like appreciated. Like these cartoons that were like cartoons were like people were just like staring at these cells, these like drawings and these paintings of these cells, and it kind of clicked in of the process of how these were kind of made in these individual kind of drawings, especially back then, by like a guy like Chuck Jones, and the nuances of this shit. So that kind of got me into wanting to like read a book that was kind of like a cartoon as you would as a kid, but maybe more kind of read it. And I remember the first ones I kind of really remember is like U.S. Acres, which was, I believe, is it the guy that maybe did Garfield had a side hustle of like farm animals, and it's called U.S. Acres. And I remember loving. Do you remember that?
No, that's awesome though. Please tell me more.
Well, I think it's the same guy. Is it Jim Davis?
Okay. You mean Orson and his farm or something like that? Right. They converted in I know Orson and Power Pig and all that stuff.
So I think their book was called U.S. Acres.
Okay.
And I remember it was in a long format, not a comic book format, but like a long format where it was like a flip book. And I remember just fucking loving that and reading that, and just reading books about Chuck Jones, that original animator and drawer that invented, like Melvin the Martian. I remember like my first time I ever played in front of people an instrument. I did it like a guitar recital when I was like 11 or something. And it was like in this like small town outside of Vancouver, and we had to like play a song in front of people. It's the first time I ever played in front of people. I remember I saw the list of the names of all the kids playing and the songs, and there was like a star, like an asterisk beside my name. And I remember asking, why is there an asterisk beside my name? And they said, well, it's because you wrote your own song. And I just thought everyone had to write their own song. My song was called Tribute to Melvin the Martian, because I was so obsessed with like Chuck Jones and his like characters that he created from like reading his books. I was almost going to buy that book again the other day. It's funny, but I was obsessed with that and like the creation of it, and it's kind of like, it talks about even like this radio station and even music and being in a band, that when you like something, and anyone is like this, I think with art, I think there's a side of people that when you really like something, like an art, there's a side or a voice that makes you or wants you to try your hand at it. I saw Pump Up the Volume when I was a kid, and that made me want to do like a radio show. It was like totally the seed of the Church of Steventology, my show on the station. And so when I got asked to come on to do a radio show, I always want to do something that I'm into. If it's comic books, I even tried writing a comic book too that I'm still stuck on writing. because I just love how things kind of work. And if you like something, I always think you just try and do it too, because I think you can make your own best shit. If if you want a certain comic book, go and write your own. If you want your own radio show, do your own, or your own band, your own songs, make your own favorite music. That Oasis kind of like, we're the best band in the world. It sounds so ignorant, but you should believe your band is like the best band in the world because it's you are making it. It's your thing. It should be your favorite.
It should be your favorite, but at the same time, I think it's important to not come off as like that asshole that thinks he's the best thing in the fucking world. So it's a hard tightrope to walk.
Yeah.
We got questions. Okay, so Browntown is asking, all right, I have to ask, who rocked a pager? I did, of course. Rocked many pagers. I did, and my friend Jay would leave me voice messages, and I would have to go to a payphone and pay to listen to said voice message. And one time he left me 60. That fucking son of a bitch.
That wouldn't be my friend anymore.
No, well, he's my best friend. I'm godfather to his kid.
Jesus.
Yep. Oh, it's an abusive relationship made of love, and not really any abuse, but yeah.
I remember like when I was back in like you wanted weed or any drug, you would always like remember like hashtag 911 when you like really want them to get back to you quick. You like the hashtag 911, and that would mean like call me now.
Yeah. Oh man. Melissa is asking, beautiful Melissa that's in the other room, host of the Garden of Vegan on every other Tuesday. Check strangerradio.com for schedules. She says, I always want to know if you could play in any movie of the past, what role would you play and why?
If I could play any role?
Yeah.
It'd be fucking Christian Slater and Pop Up the Volume, I guess.
Nice. And why? Come on.
Well, because he I don't know, when you're like a fucking dumb little kid that's awkward as fuck, you're chubby, you don't have a lot of friends. That movie meant so much because he had this outlet, and it speaks to the radio show. He had an outlet where he could like talk whatever the fuck he wanted. He played dope music, and I don't know, he just kind of found a voice through the airwaves, and I don't know, he kind of brought down like a corrupt system, a shitty fucking school system. The school that I went to, I mean, I lived in an amazing neighborhood, but the school I went to was like, it was just shitty. And teachers should really get paid fucking way more than they do, because when you underpay someone, they just don't care about their job, and that's like the most important fucking gig, man. So you get teachers that just have given up decades ago, and then you enter into like just like abusive fucking kids and shit. It's important. So that movie meant a lot, it inspired a lot. It introduced me to the Descendants. I mean, he played like Roland's band and like Concrete Blonde, and Leonard Cohen means a lot to me. It's a huge connection with me and my mom. And I think that was maybe the first time. I remember I knew about Cohen's poetry because of my mom's books of his, but that's maybe the first time I heard him sing was that movie. But I mean, I'm such a fucking movie geek, Mel. That's such a great question, because that one kind of would mean a lot because of those reasons. But I mean, there's so many movies I would fucking love to be in that are so inspiring. If you listen to my show on Stranger, it's so many songs that I've learned about came through soundtracks. Man, soundtracks are so important to me growing up as a dumb kid, because before the internet, and anyone listening to this, if you didn't have older siblings that were into cool shit, and if you didn't really have that many friends, movies and shows even were your main introductory to music, man. I don't know where I would ever heard of the Descendants at like 13 if it wasn't for Pump Up the Volume, because no one that I knew of that shit.
Much Music was kind of like, I remember Much Music, like just me and the dude who like started the first band I was ever in. We discovered kind of music together, discovered punk rock together, kind of. We were like Beavis and Butthead. We're just glued to Much Music all the time. But before that was Wayne's World. Like the first time I ever fell in love with the idea of live music and the idea of being two dudes talking late at night, just about stuff on kind of some kind of public access type of way, which we're kind of doing right now. It all stemmed from Wayne's World. So that's when I got obsessed with that soundtrack and just Crucial Taunt and seeing a band jam and possibly get signed and all that. It all came from that. And this great show that I think you'd actually kind of like, this Canadian show called Catwalk.
Oh yeah, dude, I remember Catwalk, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I have the only fucking interview on the internet about Catwalk with Karim Maliki Sanchez, who played Johnny. There's no other Catwalk interviews. It's just mine. And anybody can watch it on You, Me, and YTV. It is 2 40-minute parts of behind the scenes shit you will never see anywhere else. And I am so proud.
Was it the main singer dude?
The guitar player. Johnny,
Yeah.
the founder of the band. Yeah.
Yeah, he went on to like do some weird art rock shit, right?
Yeah, yeah. He was in Blue Dog Picked before he was in Catwalk. He was in a band called Blue Dog Picked, and the bass player of that band was actually an actor in Degrassi. So the two of them were into. For those of you who are fascinated by Canadian stuff,
Nev Campbell, who went on to be in Wild Things with Denise Richards and being on dude's posters
and Scream and all that. Yeah. But I thought she was the hottest in Catwalk, to be honest. Like all those other times, I'm like, yeah, but that Catwalk show. Yeah.
I was more of an Atlas fan.
Nice. Oh my God.
I love those jackets.
Wanted to make sure I got to this question. All right. I host a podcast on a different account. Hey, say your podcast name. We'll say it out loud. The question is, what was your most memorable or funny bowel movement? Do you have one of those, Steven? Because I do.
It's not the funniest, but Theo, our guitarist, who, if you know him, you'll love him, went through a phase where he would send me photos of his, and I fucking hated it, and I kept asking him not to, and like threatening him, like, hey, if you keep sending me these photos of your shit.
I do the same with my friend before cloud existed.
Oh man, I fucking hated it. He's the stupidest. Oh man, I love that guy, but fuck.
I was seeing Motley Crue in Ottawa, and it was this big road trip that we all took down, like me and this entire band called the Vaginal Croutons. So it was all of them, all four of them, and me. And we go to actually, I think there was a little bit more of us that time because we went to see Motley Crue in Ottawa twice. But the first time I think we're in the hotel or something like that. And I take this crap and I turn around and it looks like the question mark from Batman Forever. You know, that was on all the merchandise, T-shirts, in the sky under the bat signal, and it looked like an actual question mark. So I take out my flip phone at the time, take like the worst, grainiest picture, and take a snap of it and send it to my buddy Babbins, and he texts back, "It's on," and proceeded to send me a picture of his crap every other day for a year.
Jesus Christ.
Oh man,
sent me a question mark shit one time too.
Riddle me this shit, man. Okay. All right. So, oh, Brown Town like that.
Of course.
Oh, I don't know what this means, but maybe you will. Steven, you have a choice between JFA or Gorilla Biscuits, but they're both playing the same night and time across town from each other. What do you do? Do you know what JFA or Gorilla Biscuits are?
Yeah, Gorilla Biscuits. Who is that from?
That is from Browntown.
Yeah, Browntown might be stoked to know. I mean, this is deep fucking nerdy shit, but
yes.
Biothread that we're speaking of that kind of brought me to the Gob guys. Actually, just like 2 days ago, Facebook has like this day memory thing, and there's a label called Revelation Records that Browntown might know, and it's a label that Gorilla Biscuits was on, and the band Biothread that I played in was on that same label too. So it was kind of rad that we shared a label with that band, and the show that was supposed to happen was going to be a show sharing the stage with Gorilla Biscuits and another amazing Revelation band named Texas Is the Reason, named after the Misfits lyric. And I'm kind of with the guy in that band, so I sent him a picture of that poster of like, hey, we could have shared the stage at one point, but we never did. But yeah,
I like it.
cool.
Awesome, man. I love those deep cuts. Okay, so let's show that podcast up there. Okay, so it's at our podcast called UFH podcast. All right, cool. Well, there's a lot of podcasts and there's a lot of free stuff in the world, and we all do this stuff where we put on free entertainment, just trying to entertain the masses, but at the same time, entertain ourselves. And Steven, our earlier chat today, we both talked about I started doing a live video broadcast on my other show, Yumi and YTV, in about April, which led into Ryan's Sick Show going live too on Facebook and YouTube, and not just strangerradio.com, which everybody should check out. But I was telling you before how kind of broadcasting, kind of like in Pump Up the Volume, where he didn't know if anyone was listening to him. He more along the lines of had to do it. You know, he had to do something. Is broadcasting for you as therapeutic as I find it what it is, especially when shit was fucked? I mean, like we're talking April, where we're a month into staying inside. We don't know if Corona can jump off surfaces and go down our throats. Like we have no idea. And out of all that fear and insanity and uncertainty of the future, I found solace in being able to actually broadcast and just put that entertainer part of my brain and that happiness that you kind of get when you're performing live and put it into something else. I want to know, was it the same thing for you, or has it ever been?
It was, yeah. That slowly happened because when I first started, I was brought on to host a show on a station called 8-Ball Radio that had a little kind of outfit out of this basement in Soho here in New York, and they kind of had like a TV station, and they had like a zine. They're kind of quite like a political art zine community that had this radio station, and I knew the manager of it, met them at this bar by my place, and she eventually asked me to come on, and that's where I first kind of started. So if you go listen to the first, I don't know, 20 episodes of the Church of Steventology, they're all still broadcast out of 8-Ball Radio that are linked to strangerradio.com. And back then I was just kind of playing music. I love one of my favorite relationships with people is when they share music, when they hear a song or they know of a band or they find out about a band and they think of you and they think that you would love it too. And when you do, that's such a rad kind of connection. That's such an amazing friendship for a lot of reasons, you know? But to your question, what kind of evolved was, and maybe you noticed this or anyone that listens to like my dumb little show, is I eventually started doing like rants off the top of my show, like the first 10, 15, 20 minutes of the Church of Steventology. I kind of started doing kind of rants, like either things that I think are funny or things I want to talk about or things that are like dumb or all of those things. And I started kind of doing that, kind of like, not like stand-up comedy, but maybe like a George Carlin stand-up comedy where he's kind of just talking about shit. And maybe it's slightly peppered and seasoned with funny things, hopefully funny things. And I started doing that some time ago. And when I started doing that, I noticed that a couple of things kind of happened. One, I noticed people started tuning in more and just to hear the rants, and they would typically just stop listening after I would do the rant. I'm not giving a fuck about what music I play, which is awesome. And I appreciate that. But I also noticed that it made me want to be better at it too. It made me want to dig deeper. And it's kind of like a cliche thing with comedians is you start talking, you start telling jokes. Once those are done, once that show's done, that episode of Steventology is done, you can't revisit it. So you can't just keep thinking up just fucking dumb jokes. You have to kind of keep digging deeper, and you kind of have to go deeper into the well and start talking about those things that we talked about, like about what shit was like when I was a teenager, or, you know, life was like on the road, or drug addiction, or losing people to addiction and stuff like that. And you just start getting more natural and wanting to be more natural. And it's difficult because this is different because we're having a conversation, but it's a difficult thing. I think it is a difficult thing to do because you're talking about these things that are meaningful to you and you don't have any response. You're not seeing anyone's face. You're not hearing anyone's laughter or anyone's kind of like side tilt of their head. that's like feeds you to kind of dig even deeper and shows you that they're being interested. You're kind of just talking to like dead air, and to learn how to like get over that void that you're talking to and still keep digging. And then hopefully wait. I'm so lucky. I have such an amazing group of people that listen to my show. A lot of them are close friends that will hit me up, text me even during the show and laugh, or text me with things they hate that I say. I have some people that like disagree with lots of stuff that I say, but they still tune in because they want to hear you say something. And that's such a rad thing, especially in today's, fucking dumb climate of rooting for your own team, or only hearing what you want to hear, or shouting out into a reverbed room of only your own thoughts that you share with others. To hear someone talk about something, even if you don't agree with it, just to be able to listen to them and to talk back to, man, when we go live on that Stranger Radio, there's chats open like there's here with your show on YouTube.
Yeah.
To go back and forth, to be able to talk is an amazing thing. So it is a bit of an outlet, man. And especially me, and I know you kind of know this, and your lady Mel hints at this too, is I can be kind of a little bit reclusive and somewhat of a recluse. So my show a lot of the time is the most I'll talk, and I'm kind of just doing it to the air, but in a way you're kind of doing it to like a weird, strange community of people that you're either offending, or they're laughing with you, or they agree with you. But you do learn, as you're saying, you do feeling like you do need it, as you're speaking about. You do feel when you don't do it, it's not even you feel that you need it, but it's almost like maybe any other relationship. You feel it when it goes away. When you don't, you feel there's a difference. There's a difference because that outlet's gone, and you've kind of became dependent on it. So that's kind of a trip, to realize that.
It's the feeling you get when you do a good job, and when it's done, and then all of a sudden, like it's that high of getting off of stage or something like that, knowing that you did a good job. But also the same thing can happen where you're like, oh my God, I could feel this so good because of this. But at the same time, you could finish a broadcast feeling lower than low, and it goes wrong, and you've never felt worse in your life. So that's everybody. That's what life is. It's feelings. If you have it in yourself to be artistically connected to whatever you're doing, where it can make you so happy you could cry, it can also make you feel so fucking bad that it can devastate you and paralyze you with sadness. Have you ever had a broadcast that you thought went so bad that you had a hard time getting back on the bicycle and with your scraped knees?
Yeah. There was one where I don't know what it was. I still don't know what happened, but I enjoyed the rant I did, but there's something clicked, and it just felt, like you said, it just felt kind of horrible. And I'll talk throughout my whole show. Every couple songs I'll talk, and there's always stories throughout and shit, typically. But on that one, it was the first show I've done. I think it's 92 shows now. That was the first show where, after my initial rant and I started playing music, I didn't talk for the rest of the show because I just was so bummed. I was so bummed. And I still don't even know why. It takes me back to a feeling. I tried doing stand-up when I first moved to New York. I went to an open mic, and I did try doing I was working like 4 or 5 minutes of stand-up, and I did it. And I bombed hard. And I got like heckled by another comedian, which I thought was like against the rules, but I guess it's not. But I went into like this fucking weird, I tell myself I went into like a weird 2-week depression, but I don't even know what I would call it. It's just such a weird feeling. And there's a reason why they call it, when you're on stage, you either like murder or you die. And I think they call it that because you feel, it's like, and it sounds so silly, but you don't know the feeling when you go up on a stage. Playing music is one thing because you have a band with you or an instrument in front of you, and you're not even really talking. You're like performing this thing. But when you go onto a stage and you're just talking, and you just have to win a crowd over by just talking, and it doesn't work, and it's almost like repelled, and it's like really not liked. They're just not liking you. And it's such a weird, but I think it's a natural feeling to feel that shittiness of it not working. I think the thing that makes comedians great, and obviously I'm far from one, because the thing that makes one great is they have that yearning, that even though they have that bombing, even though they have that depression, even though they have that dying feeling in it, there's something in them that makes them go back and keep doing it and keep dying. There's a weird little, I think it's a weird little insecurity that they need that killing. They need that laugh. They're chasing that dragon of that attention. And I don't have that fucking in me, man. Like, I kind of wish I did, but it just hurts so much. I'm like, I don't even have this in me. Like, this just hurts. That hurt.
Yeah, I can't do stand-up comedy, but Kevin Smith style, I could go up and tell 45 minutes worth of stories, no problem. But if it has to be a cohesive set of a set list of punchlines, can't do it. No way. Not at all. It has to just happen. Honestly, like, you can kind of, you know your stories. Like, I have a story I'm not going to tell now about how I, like, got so drunk I defecated my pants once. I'm not going to tell now, but I've told it on the show before. It's it's just one of those stories that actually kind of like takes maybe 6 or 7 minutes just to get all those nuances. So when the story happens, there's these points and like a film. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and there's a reason for the beginning, middle, and an end. But if you just walked up and told somebody, "Oh yeah, Avengers Endgame, yeah, they beat Thanos,"
you got to work to that.
Yeah, you got to work to it,
if you will.
But when they give you 5 minutes and stand up, and people aren't liking that story from the get-go, imagine you're telling a story that nobody likes, and it takes 5 minutes to tell it. There you go. Like, the long form conversational, sometimes funny things work, but I've tried the stand-up comedy thing, not particularly. I did this BattleCom competition and did fairly well the first time, but then had that sophomore slump of never winning it again. Yeah. So got in there, did a really good job, and then every single time was just worse and worse and worse. Yeah. BattleCom's a great show, though. Melissa asked this amazing question. I really got, she tells me that she's not a natural interviewer. She is.
She's fucking great.
She says, speaking of movies and shows, if there was a movie about your life, what band would you want doing the soundtrack? Amazing question, Melissa. Amazing.
That's a good question.
Yeah. I would need 4 bands, because 4 bands can describe my life. Like, when I was 11, it would be like Green Day would have to do the soundtrack. Abso-fucking-lutely. But then later in life, in my 20s, I was listening to more Motley Crue and Kiss. And then recently, I listened to nothing but Carpenter Brut and the Proto Man. So,
But you need someone that can handle
all your shit.
All the emotions. You know who it would be? It'd be Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross.
Oh, yeah.
They did The Social Network and a bunch of Fincher films, but they did the Watchmen series. And the Watchmen series, if you haven't seen it, it's probably one of the best TV shows I've ever seen. And it deals with so much shit. Everything that you want in a show, like extreme sadness and tragedy and action and romance and love and loss, everything that all the best stories have. And they have such like a brilliant take on it, those two guys. I know people just think Trent is pure Nine Inch Nails, but he can do so much more than that. If you really watch that show, The Watchmen, going back to comic book roots, what they do with the music, and there's always a dark kind of tinge to it and a dark mystery to it, but it can be so beautiful and ethereal and also sad and exciting and fun. And so it'd be those two guys. That's a good question, Mel.
Yeah, my friend Marco is a visually brilliant guy and loves Nine Inch Nails. Has loved them longer than I have. In fact, he probably showed the dude Robin, who showed me Nine Inch Nails. Like, Marco was that guy in high school that knew the music. He was the one wearing we had school uniforms, and every time we'd go outside for recess or lunch, he'd throw a Misfits shirt on top of it. He lent me American Psycho the first time, because that was the album that had just come out. And it's crazy. So it was weird to tell him about the Watchmen. Here's the guy that told me about Evil Dead and the Misfits almost in the same sentence that would change my life forever in a movie visual sense and a musical sense.
You mean the show? You told him about the show?
Yeah, and telling him about the Watchmen, just because I'm a little more dialed into shows that come out because I'm always on the internet, and if it's geek related, that's but he knows shit tons of obscure cult and horror movies that I've never seen. Like, it's a good partnership because we make music videos together called in a company called Mind Blender Media, and we made this crazy fucking music video. Sorry for the tangent. We made this crazy music video for a band called the Hazy Tones, called The Hand That Feeds, and it involves like a hand from a dimension going into a mirror into another dimension that he dropped a joint in, but in this dimension the joint flies and terraforms the earth into a big zombie mess with stop animation, a bunch of weird crazy shit.
That old chestnut.
Yeah, and Marco's just that kind of guy that brings it to the table, and I'm more of the technician of, I know I can figure out how we're going to do this, but it definitely takes him to be the dreamer. So when I saw The Watchmen and saw those images merged with that brilliant soundtrack, I was like, I can't go to him and beg him to watch this show, because that's not how this works. That's not how you can get someone into something, because it's almost annoying. But I will tell you and everyone on the internet, I got word that his girlfriend bought him the Blu-ray and waited day by day just to hear him finally say, I watched the show and I liked it. It will make me feel better to know that he is experiencing this show. And that's how passionate The Watchmen made me, and how I know people who would like a show like that should see that show, because HBO Max is not exactly the most common app in Canada.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was super cool when my friends all finally saw that. And then some of my friends saw it way before I did. And then they gave away the last episode way before I saw it, but it didn't matter, because the show's so good that when you know who's who and know, or I'm trying to avoid spoilers, it's almost like every time they would walk on screen, you're like, you. And then when you finally see it come in fruition, I'm like, yeah, it would have been amazing to kind of get completely caught off guard, but at the same time, it's actually even better the entire time, where every time they're on screen, they're like, you.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
I do. I'm rewatching it right now, actually, and there's brilliant little hints to that throughout.
Just one thing. Steven, I know I'm your booking agent, and multi megawatt says, if either of you guys want to do a podcast, just shoot me the contact info. We do not give our contact info on publicly on YouTube or something like that, but if you do want to reach out to Steven, the Church of Steven, the Stranger Radio page is the way to get a hold of Steven on Facebook if you need to get a hold of him.
Yeah. I think there's contact info at the bottom of strangeradio.com. You can write to us there, bro.
Yeah.
And that'd be cool.
Yeah. I just don't say my email out loud on the internet, because I keep getting spammed, and Arabian princes who need $4,000 keep emailing me, and multiple people claiming to be the government keep calling me saying, like, your social insurance number is in jeopardy. Speak to one of our agents or you'll get arrested immediately. I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure the government of Canada isn't from Montreal and doesn't have a 514 area code. Because if that was the case, you'd be speaking fucking French. Anyway, funny stories. Well, okay, so we're talking about Watchmen. We're talking about that soundtrack and that just amazing relationship and marriage of visuals meet audio, creating a modern masterpiece. Tell me about The Watchmen to you. Tell me the first time you saw it and how it made you feel and all that.
I mean, firstly, it was sad because, I mean, growing up in Canada, we don't learn a lot about American history, but even learning, it opens up with what happened in Tulsa in the 1920s and Black Wall Street and the massacre there of African Americans, where they just destroyed a town and killed hundreds of people. And just not knowing that was fucking so sad, because it came out at a time too where the world was really looking and examining and being fed up with what was happening in America with the BLM movement. And then I even like knew people. Fuck, who is it? I even like knew someone who like grew up in Tulsa in that neighborhood that didn't even know about the massacre that happened in there in the 20s. So learning that just blew me away. So that kind of opens with that, not to spoil it, but it opens with that. So learning that dark history, it gave it a weight, because everyone just thinks, oh, it's like superheroes or it's a comic book, but you got to kind of forget about that and just really watch it, and maybe watch the movie first, because you kind of have to know a background. But it gave it this initial weight to it that like was unsettling and sad, but they used the tragedy as a backdrop, kind of like they used Superman planet being destroyed and his family being taken from him and him going off into the world as the backdrop. Like a hero's birth is in tragedy. It's like a cliche comic book thing, but to do it
Absolutely.
in such a brilliant way, and using the atrocities of American history as the backdrop in the setting off the fucking get-go was just like, holy fuck, this is crazy. And then you can enter into the just other things that they flip scripts on, man, like having like the main character be like this badass black woman. So often in movies and films, we're used to it where the main lead has like this hot wife or a hot girlfriend, and she's like the hot wife and the hot girlfriend, and she's doing hot wife and hot girlfriend shit. And we don't even think about that, and not to be all whatever, but that's just how shit goes. To have this show, especially in the first 4 or 5 episodes, the woman be like the fucking badass, like a true badass, and she has like this hot husband. And really, first few episodes, he's just a fucking hot husband. He's just like doing hot husband shit. She like fucks him sometimes. He's like,
my friend Jen loves him. Loves him. Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, it's an amazing thing. But like, he's just like the hot guy, and even them flipping something small like that was something that we're not even used to ever seeing. That like he's just like eye candy, like the dude is the eye candy, and they don't even like really put a spotlight on that. But having that just be part of it was beautiful and just rad to kind of see, man. And she just fucking killed it, man. I mean, there's a reason. I mean, like fuck awards, but there's a reason why that show like won like what, like 20 fucking Emmy, like it's
shit tons. Yeah,
there's a reason for it. There's just something kind of so, I don't know, special to it. I had a friend that like she said she watched half of it and then stopped watching it, and I was just kind of dumbfounded and curious how someone would stop watching that show. And maybe it's because it kind of has a science fiction element to it. It kind of has a far-fetchedness, but I almost see it as not a far-fetchedness. I just see it as a possible alternate reality where if something happened in the 80s,
shit, we gotta stop, dude. I just realized on Stranger Radio I gotta turn us off because that jazz show is supposed to start.
Oh, the Reverend Jazz Show.
Okay, Stranger Radio signing off. Sorry about that. Okay, we're still live on Facebook. Cool.
Yeah, man. I mean, I could just go off about that show, but just the having something, it's like the butterfly effect, having something small, or in this case, something huge happen to America in the 80s, changed the trajectory of culture and technology and politics. And they blended that all in without explaining it all. They blended it all in such a non exposition way, just through witnessing a world. Instead of having a world explained to you, you're just watching a world be a world, and you're learning about it that way. You're learning by showing and not telling. And when someone can do that with a story, is the best way to kind of tell a story. And that Damon Lindelof dude, who like people will know from Lost and The Leftovers, maybe HBO show, was just a master at it.
Yeah, exactly. Like leaving things up in the air, up to interpretation. He really, like, especially with The Leftovers, like I haven't even seen most of or any of all The Leftovers, but the interview I saw with him that fascinated me, because actually I just remember before, Marco, I was telling you about, I wanted him to watch the show. We actually saw the pilot together when we were working on something else. We watched a pilot, and what we took from it is like, oh wow, this was a really cool looking show. I don't know what the hell is going on. I don't know if this is an alternative dimension. I don't know if this is a future.
Or Watchmen.
Oh, The Watchmen.
Yeah.
So we weren't sure. Like, we both watched a pilot, but at that point, because like I said, I'm more dialed into the internet. When something comes out that week, I can find ways to watch it. But him, not so much. So we watched the pilot together, but when I was talking about anticipating, I'm like, I just wanted to see the whole series as a whole and come away with it with what you feel when it's done. And I remember like, of course we're attracted to it because it's Nine Inch Nails doing a soundtrack. But what really made me, and this is not a spoiler because this is in the book and this is also in the movie and how they deal with it. There is no giant squid in the movie, but there is a giant squid in the comic book. But the giant squid's important. Yeah. And this is not a spoiler because there's a scene where you actually see what happens when the giant squid actually does come to New York, and you see that in New Jersey it fucked people up based on just the sound. It coming into our dimension, breaking the sound barrier and the sonic boom it created. And that's all the devastation. Because to me, when I read the comic book, I'm like, oh shit, a squid's there sitting on people. Yeah, that must have killed some people, I guess, as big as a squid is. And if he wiggles them around, that's all the death around. But it's like, no, man, the squid's there and he's breaking buildings. That's one thing. But if you're in Jersey and you get fucked up because of it, that's I love the legitimacy they gave a squid, because before that, when I love the Watchmen movie, love it. And before that, I always thought to myself, the squid's kind of like unnecessary. Like in the book, I'm like, I get it, but I don't get it. But everybody coming together, blaming Dr. Manhattan in the movie, and that's how you have a pseudo happy ending, made a lot of sense to me. When, Russia and America, when they were against the Germans, that's when they got along the most. So I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But I will love this show forever based on the fact that they gave a legitimacy and a danger to that squid in my mind that will always exist, that even reverberates when I read the book now. I see the squid in the book now, and I'm like, fuck, this thing is the deadliest thing in this book. Well, before I was just kind of like, oh, okay, cool, giant squid.
Yeah. I think it made sense because it's less fantastic that they went with the blast, and sadly, it was more easily digestible that a bomb would go off in New York than an interdimensional squid would fall, releasing psychic blasts.
Yeah. But like I said, man, with that, I thought so too. The bomb, everything made way more sense to me.
Yeah.
But after that show, that fucking squid, man, and good on them for that. Good on them for that show. And it's amazing. Like, everybody, if you ever see the show, I know we're just going on about Watchmen, you're just like, oh my God, who the fuck cares? You should. But look, watch it if you want. But the thing to take away from it the most is, yes, kind of watch the movie to kind of get a sense of who the hell everything is. Because as the movie unfolds, you'll see that everything that's happened in the book matters. Everything. And the creators of the show clearly had a lot of love and respect for the book, and weren't kind of making up their own ways to go along. Because if the show takes place in a certain amount of time, the past has to honor the future. And they really, even though they created more of a past than the show ever did, especially in that beginning. In fact, their surrealistic take of the 80s in the comic book being like an idea that that Nixon has been elected like 5 times at this point and is just a permanent president because he ended Vietnam by sending Dr. Manhattan over there to decimate the Viet Cong. It's when the Tulsa massacre happened in the beginning, I'm like, oh, that's cool. They took this alternative version of their own history and militarized the KKK. And then when I found out, no, that shit's real, you're like, fuck. That's actually what made me even jump back into the show, because I was waiting to watch the rest of the show with my buddy, but I'm like, no, I got to see this on my own just based on that interview I saw. And that's my selling point. That's how I got people to watch the show. I said, you know, that first episode, that shit happened.
Hmm.
And they're like, oh shit, maybe we should watch the rest of this, because clearly in the surrealistic reality that is The Watchmen, they take a really hard peg from reality and stab you in the thigh with it as the show begins.
That was how Damon Lindelof, it's the Ryan Stick show, so who gives a fuck, but the way he got into The Watchmen, because they were asking him to do it for years and he kept saying no. And then he actually learned about what happened in Tulsa from, I forget his name, but there was a writer who would write for Black Panther back in the day and ended up writing a couple novels. I forget his name. Maybe someone that's listening knows, but he wrote a novel where it's him. It's like a book about a father writing letters to his son about living as a Black American. But on top of these books, and it was like one of Oprah's best books or whatever the fuck, but on top of that, he would write Black Panther comics. And it was through that book that Damon Lindelof, the writer and showrunner of The Watchmen, learned about what happened in Tulsa. And then when he learned that, he kind of had the idea of using this atrocity as the backdrop for this next chapter, these characters. And it was because of that writer who kind of came from comic books, went on to novels. And it was Damon Lindelof being so at awe. And again, him being dumbfounded by not knowing this, being an American, and what happened not too long ago in American history, and how the crazy history of, like, it was actually like called Black Wall Street because it was so affluent. Like they were doing so well, and they kind of all the businesses, and in the 1920s that was just like unheard of, right? So that was like the jumping point. It's like, okay, if I can, this is Damon Lindelof talking, okay, if I can do this story using this as the jumping point and this is the backdrop, and then as you said, with Nixon being in office for so long, but turning it to Robert Redford, kind of spinning on the Ronald Reagan thing, but instead of going Republican, kind of going real progressive left, and having Redford being the president, who's just kind of there forever. And using that, I don't want to spoil nothing, but what he ended up doing for the Black community and having them kind of prosper. It's just good writing, man. I'm just a sucker for a good story, man. And that's what it's just a good story. I mean, there's such important, the setting to it and the background to it is so heavy and important for people to know. But at the end of the day, it's just a fucking good story. And yeah, it involves kind of superhero stuff, or it involves people dressing up in costumes and fighting crime. But it kind of like laughs at that too. It like really kind of laughs at that idea of someone in a costume fighting crime. Especially
the Russian cop with the red mask.
Yeah.
Like who thinks it's just ridiculous fuck, but loves the fact that he can just beat the fuck out of anybody because he's not a police officer. He's a character at that point. Okay, so he said, hey, get a hold of me, because he sent off an email, but he's like, next question, what's the meaning of life to you? Do you know what the meaning of life is to you, Steven?
No.
Okay. I think the meaning of life is you come out great and situations kind of turn you into a little bit of an asshole. But if you're kind of almost not as much of an asshole as you were when you were a baby, you did good. Yeah.
I would say there isn't one, and only humans need to put meaning to things. And it's just a human trait, and the rest of the universe and animals and plant life don't know what meaning is, and they exist and die and are born without it. And it's just a word that we use to put purpose to things that don't have to have a purpose. It just is.
I think it's a rather confusing Monty Python movie. That's what I think it is. It's not as good as Life of Brian. That's what I think. Oh man. Yeah, great question. Awesome. Steven, we didn't see Wonder Woman. We didn't see Black. We didn't see a shit ton of stuff. In fact, I think Eternals would have been out by now. I think. Fuck. Are we behind in our usual year spin? But I'm having a I think people need to really think about the greatness that has been television for the last, like, not this year, but the last 2 years prior to that, and the amazing content that came out, because it's quite a kind of exceptional when you think about the list of quality programs that came out almost seemingly at once, like including Happy season 1 and 2, just these brilliant. Like if you like Christmas violent style, Happy is amazing. Do you have any other recommendations for people who are just kind of like bored with the norm and want to get into a good old show or movie that they should check out?
I liked Raised by Wolves, is recent.
Cool.
Ridley Scott directed it, but it's written by someone else, and it's, if you like science fiction, it's a pretty cool and confusing and beautiful science fiction show, Raised by Wolves. I mean, The Watchmen you should watch if you haven't seen it. What else, man?
I like to upload. It's advertised like shit. It's kind of like a, what, you're dead and this is the afterlife? Whoa! But it's actually kind of beautiful and amazing.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, it's on Amazon Prime. It's actually really good. And Hunters was really good on Amazon Prime. Amazon Prime's got some good fucking shows. Anyway.
I thought Preacher was good. I thought Legion was beautiful. Those are two awesome shows that if no one's seen, they might like. Legion is like a beautiful mind trip, kind of ethereal, really arty. And Preacher is just a really crazy, actiony, fucked up story, I'd say. Yeah, I mean, again, those are just comic pulls, man. But fuck, it's the source material is just such a high standard. And aren't they both? Oh no, Seth Rogen just did one of them, right? I mean, The Boys was great.
Yeah, The Boys was great. I mean, there's this whole list I'm not even thinking about. I really like Titans season 1, not season 2 so much. I found there was just too many characters and it watered everything down. I kind of liked it when it was just about Dick Grayson trying to be a detective, reluctant former superhero trying to take care of a girl with magic powers.
Yeah, I liked it too.
I like season 1 a little bit better. Season 2, so it was a good show, but I'm just like, let's too many characters. It's what DC does. They're like, hey, Justice League, let's have 30 members. How about we have 7? And that's what Grant Morrison did back in the 90s when he took over the book that would inspire the Justice League cartoon, where he's just like, instead of all these random characters that you would see in the Death of Superman, where Doomsday beat the Justice League, but did he though? You know, you have Fire and Ice and a bunch of other heroes that you're like, Doomsday wasn't fighting the Flash or Wonder Woman or anything like that. Yeah. It was like Justice League and like Incorporated or whatever. It's just, and then Grant Morrison comes in to write the book, and he's just like, let's get all 7 members back. Sure, some of them are dead, but whatever modern version of them there are, like Green Lantern, you're gonna have Kyle, you're gonna have Wally West, who's critical of Kyle, because even though Kyle's the 3rd Green Lantern, technically, if you want to get really dorky about it, but comes after Hal Jordan and is the young guy, and Wally West was that guy for so long. To see him kind of have no patience for a new kid is, considering Wally West was a former kid sidekick, is amusing to me. But Grant Morrison, that's what he did. He's just like, look, I don't want all these other characters. Let's bring the original 7 Justice League back together and write our stories that way. And
Grant did Doom Patrol 2, which was a good show too.
Doom Patrol is a great show. Yeah. But there's more shows too that I'm just trying to remember. But there's, like I said, there's
Umbrella Academy.
Umbrella Academy. There you go. There's 2 seasons of Umbrella Academy. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
And if you're tired of those CW shows and all that kind of stuff, then the Thinking Man superhero show exists, and there's shit tons of them.
Yeah, for sure, man.
But all those CW shows are a necessary evil, man, because they kind of bring superheroes to the mainstream and get it popular enough where if you want to listen to something obscure, I mean, everybody can have their Blink-182s and their Green Days, but if you want to, get into something a little more harder, you kind of need to hear about. The new generation needs that big, sugary, tasty snack. And it's up to them to decide when they want to drink some scotch, Yeah.
Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
young adult.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, I fucking was obsessed with Smallville when I was young. I
Me
visited
too.
like twice. I was like, and I knew it was bad, but I was like obsessed with it. I
I
hated,
think
hated
I think
quote.
it's super fucking funny that I think it's super funny that in Smallville, I gotta hand to the Flash and everything. At least action happens, but in Smallville, it will all build up to Clark showing up and pushing a guy. That is it. Clark uses his powers for about 3 seconds, and
Yeah.
that's about all the super you get in the entire show.
It's just a soap opera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Arrow kind of comes and changes everything, but the Flash really like we all have to think it's like, what do we like? What do we know? What do we like? But it's about like the modern 9-year-old. What are they going to be into? And all this will die unless that kind of stuff brings you back in. Like I watched X-Men the animated series in 1992 and heard of the Dark Phoenix and watched the Dark Phoenix. But motherfuckers had heard of the Dark Phoenix for 15 years at that point, thanks to the writing of Chris Claremont. So we need these kind of new interpretations of things to pull people back into the scripture, if you want to get into it, of comic book history. And you kind of need Adam West being goofy Batman for people to start reading Batman comic books again. And then that's important because later when he gets dark, you look at 66 and be like, fuck 66. I like this guy. And then later on, when Batman gets so dark that he starts shooting people with fucking bullets, people are like, remember Batman 66? That was fun.
You're
So
right.
that's how it comes around. Batman 66 has been a source of shame, but all of a sudden it's been more beloved now than possibly it's ever been since 1966 right now.
Yeah. That's what kids wanted, man. They wanted camp.
What kind of Batman did you want? Who is your ideal Batman out of all the Batmen that have graced the silver screen so far?
Out of the silver screen?
Yeah, on the silver screen or the small screen if you want to count Kevin Conroy's voice acting, because I do.
Yeah, Conway is king, man. I mean, but they all hit it in different ways, you know. I mean, they all kind of hit it in different ways. The only thing that really hasn't been shown yet, I mean, even like Ben Affleck, like how big he got from a physical standpoint, and the brutality that he showed was cool. But the only thing, and even like George Clooney's suaviness as Bruce fit in with how Bruce Wayne bullshit is, you know what I mean? And
I think there just wasn't enough of a stretch when he was in the suit that it was kind of just Bruce Wayne wearing a mask at that point.
yeah, I mean,
yeah,
there's so much wrong with that movie, but the thing that's always been missing, man, that's really stopped it from being a 10 out of 10, and hopefully it will happen with this next one, is you're dealing with someone that is essentially, I love that show Sherlock with Benedict Cumberbatch. I think it's a brilliant show.
So good.
And how they show
so good.
Yeah. And how they wrote and portrayed and showed his brilliance of deduction is what made that show kind of dope. And how Benedict Cumberbatch kind of sold it and played it was fucking like flawless. I think he's great. But what you're dealing with, like fucking with bats, man, is you're dealing with a Sherlock Holmes motherfucker. You're dealing with someone who is supposed to be the world's best detective. He's supposed to be in that world, the Sherlock Holmes of that world. And you're missing that attribute that makes him who he is. He's of course like a billionaire with like at a top physical, you know, form and all the gadgets a billionaire can buy. But what makes him interesting, I think, and what's always been missing from a movie is you're dealing with someone that's supposed to be like one of the world's smartest men when it comes to like deducing shit and criminology. And that's never been fucking really explored in any of the fucking movies. And that's what made Sherlock so cool. It wasn't a guy who's just rad at fucking karate. It was a guy who was like solving shit because he was the smartest guy in the room, to a point that it was disabling to him and made him like a, you know, what was he, a fucking cokehead or whatever? And the Sherlock Holmes books, I think he would shoot cocaine because I think he was based on like Freud, who Freud was constantly doing cocaine. And you're missing that, right? You're missing someone who has that brilliance and can solve anything with just his mind, just sitting in a room and just thinking, and to make that into a story that's interesting enough to watch, that they did in like Sherlock, the BBC series. They needed to make Bruce that. It's not about. I mean, action's fun and cinematic. Cinema has to be cinematic, but we got to show that fucking detective, because that is what's dope, I think, and that's what's always been missing. So it's never been a home run, and hopefully with this new one that Matt Reeves is doing with Robert Pattinson, the rumor is, as you know, it's supposed to be a true detective story.
Yeah.
So I hope it shows that this person is like an almost an Aspergery level brilliance of like autistic fucking brain activity, to like where he's also a psychopath with like a split personality and like completely tormented with PTSD. But on top of like this like torment of PTSD of his parents passing, is brutally in front of him is like this brilliant mind, like a beautiful mind, but like show fucking that,
It's Ben Affleck actually was in this movie called The Accountant, which is fucking awesome.
Yeah, totally.
And I thought he was more Punisher than any Punisher. Like, that Frank that just doesn't care anymore, is stoic. My buddy Sean Bachu, it's funny, he brought up like what he loves about Punisher and what hasn't been on screen yet. And it was the day I interviewed him on this show on strangerera.com. The day before I saw Punisher season 2. And he's like, the one thing that pisses me off is every time Punisher feels the need to, like an animal, admit a big scream, because that's not Frank. Frank will get stabbed in the leg and barely flinch. Yes, he is feeling it, but he just won't show it, because he's hardened. And then the last frame that Punisher ever showed in that show was the guy coming up with his machine gun, finally in Punisher form in his outfit, and this is Punisher Marvel season 2, and he goes, "Oh!" And I'm like, okay, yeah, it's a different interpretation of the character. But then when I saw Ben Affleck in The Accountant, where he's just fucking shooting motherfuckers left and right with this constant look of concentration, which in the movie is actually autism, but in a character sense, I'm like, holy shit, that fucking totally works. And the guy who plays the Punisher is in that movie, and I'm like, he's out punishing the Punisher by unintentionally doing so. And he brought a little bit of that to his Bruce Wayne. His Bruce Wayne was he never got really excited about anything. He was always kind of a little there. But I found with the writing of Batman v Superman, they just they didn't. Here I am bitching about this movie all these years later. Here's the thing, kids. I just wanted to know why Batman was Batman, because in the sense where you're going to show us the pearls in the fucking alley again, you can at least show us the death of Jason Todd that hardened the father into the bullet wielding sociopath he is,
So they revealed that old Robin costume was actually Dick's. That Dick is the one.
Yeah, exactly. Like Dick was supposed to die, which would make him even go more crazy. Because if you're like a father and your adopted son gets beaten to death by your greatest enemy based on your failure, that's something that would make you into a gun-toting, like, I don't give a fuck anymore. But it's just like Superman and the aliens, they did that to the buildings. That sucks, but it doesn't explain the character difference. It could be the teetering point, but I found in a 3.5-hour movie full of random dream sequences that don't go anywhere and make any sense. Apparently they will with the Snyder Cut. I think you could have showed 5 minutes or less, 30 seconds of a tipping point of why that character would that's been anti-gun for 70 years, all of a sudden, like, resort to them constantly.
Well, remember there's guns in the Tim Burton movie too, though.
I know, but not as much.
He killed a bunch of people in that parade.
I know.
There's, you know what I mean?
And he blows up a clown in Batman Returns, but I kind of find it like if it came out before the year of Iron Man and The Dark Knight, which came out in the same summer, and then you still make the same mistakes, then you kind of got to go fuck yourself. Because that's when the bar was kind of raised, where the creators and the wise to comic book people kind of took control. That's kind of like it. If it happened after 2008, you really don't have an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But pre 2008, oh my God, we could talk about those doozies all day, like Catwoman and Elektra and Blade Trinity and Blade Trinity and the Fantastic Four movies. Yes, every iteration of them. The new Fantastic Four, man. If they make a TV show or a movie, there's nowhere but up. There really isn't.
Yeah, the rumors is that they're making one. I think they've bought the domain names, which is always the first hint of pre-production.
Yeah.
Looking
forward to that, man. That's fun. I'm looking forward to the X-Men coming home. I have a theory because I just heard that Wanda is going to be the enemy in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a feeling that it's the actions in WandaVision that will tip her into like probably creating. She probably creates the multiverse with her powers and stuff like that, most likely. And if she's the big enemy of it or unintentional enemy, it's probably what happens in WandaVision that creates that. But with the Multiverse of Madness, when all the things when the dust settles, you have this great opportunity to have the X-Men having existed for decades in another dimension to just show up in this dimension when the walls of reality kind of just settle in it and it's all one place. Then all of a sudden you don't have to have all your X-Men being like 15 years old. You could. It would be cool. It would be cool to merge them with Spider-Man movies. I'm not saying, but if you need, your adult Wolverines in a world where mutants have existed since World War II, you can.
Mm-hmm. And it's such a flip too for the people that are the nerds that know about House of M and how she killed off, 90% of mutants, to flip it and have the person that actually killed almost all of the mutants back in the day in the books be the one that curates them or introduces them to our reality would be an interesting thing. And it's really the only way I can see them doing it. I don't know how else these people would have been around with all of these attacks on Earth without kind of popping up and helping and doing their fucking thing, So it's the only way I can kind of see it kind of coming is her introducing it. And it is such a cool nod to the OG nerds that here's the one that killed them. That's the one bringing them to life for us.
I can't remember if I heard someone say this or I made it up myself. I honestly cannot. So let's just say I heard it somewhere because, I would hate to use someone else's words and claim they're my own. But I always thought it'd be really cool, and I probably heard this from someone, if the X-Men were always around, but it was Charles Xavier kind of hiding them with his powers. And then all of a sudden you can animate your X-Men in all these famous battles of New York, where you see like something's about to get Hawkeye, but in the background you can't tell that Cyclops took out a guy or something like that.
Yeah, because they kind of hinted with like the Ancient One kind of battling the on the attack in New York. She was like on the Sanctum in New York battling them the whole time.
So awesome.
She was helping.
I love time travel, dude. That movie like made me happy on so many levels because I love that shit.
It's the last time I did your show when Endgame came out. Remember I called in the premiere night. I think it's the last time I did the show, and I was like, I listened back to that episode and I was like, I didn't even sound like me. I was like so excited and like energetic. I remember my girlfriend like, you're fucking a spaz. Endgame, like that movie made me like cry and like, oh man, it just was like, it was, 18 years of a build up to, and it's thinking of people that have, that we've lost along the way that I wish could have seen this movie too. And it's a whole like time capsule of like a looking back like, oh man, it's been a long
journey.
Yeah.
It's with Avengers Endgame. I remember like That's kind of like what I miss. Like, Steven, talking to you tonight has been unreal and it's been amazing. And it feels great to connect with a friend and with the powers of the internet and vividly remembering the 90s when all this was impossible. Um, it's an incredible thing to feel. But there, as you know, as a performer, is a certain kinetic energy that a crowd creates. And when they're all cheering for the same thing at the same time, there's a connection that humans have that you can't kind of replicate unless you're doing that. I mean, you could all be watching a screen at once. You could be watching a video of people reacting, but it's not the same thing. To be in the theater and see that scene with Mormir and the fucking shield was the biggest pop I've ever fucking heard in a movie theater before or since. Like, that is just something else.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, man. Man, living in this town too, it's seeing movies, fuck, in this town. People, I'm from Vancouver, man, and people in Vancouver, movie theaters in Vancouver, they don't fucking like move. They're very polite and courteous with us. So moving to New York, man, and seeing how people react here, like watching movies like Get Out, or I went to Black Panther opening night, and people had like literally booked the theaters, like local like black schools booked these theaters and were bringing in the school kids to watch this movie. And
Oh,
being that to see that, and they had like food set up, like there's catering, and like the adults were dressing up. A lot of the adults were dressed up in traditional African garbs, like headdresses and shit, that are sitting in the audience, like, you know, being like a dumb fucking white guy from Canada. Like, this movie is so more important than just a fucking superhero. Like, the fact that these guys have like their own superhero that kind of looks like them, and seeing them react, and like people like jumping out of their seats and like applauding and yelling, and like coming from Vancouver, no one like would dare, you know, move or like talk in a theater. Like, everyone's so polite up there. So seeing people emotionally react. Get Out was like that too. Get Out was like a trip here, but yeah, Endgame.
Get Out is just legit fucking awesome horror movie. Like, wow. And it's the performance. I don't know the name of the actor, but the guy who actually says Get Out, and in the situation he does, is like an acting performance that deserves an Academy Award, because it's like literally a light switch. Like, wow.
There's a show that called Atlanta.
Okay.
And he, speaking of that guy, Donald Glover.
Donald Glover, yeah.
Who people wanted to be Miles Morales back in the day, ended up playing his uncle, the Prowler, kind of in the movie. Also, you probably know this, he was hired to write the animated adult version of Deadpool.
Yeah, that didn't happen.
Yeah, but you can watch a little bit online, and it's fucking amazing. The dude's endlessly talented. And
yeah, Childish Gambino is amazing.
Yeah. So he has a show that he writes, directs, and stars in, but like his best friend in the movie, who's totally like the Kramer, he's kind of like steals the scene, is that actor.
Okay.
In Atlanta, and he just plays like this like weirdo, like he's always stoned, but has like that kind of brilliant stoned philosophy of life, and he's this kind of fluidity in the scene. And he had such a small part in that movie, and it's rad that you kind of clued in that there's something special about that guy. There is something special about that guy, and in that show Atlanta, he's in every episode. He's like the second main guy, so you get to see that that guy's gonna blow up. He's gonna be doing something. He's gonna be. We'll know his name next year.
There's this great show called Castle Rock that's kind of like based in Stephen King lore, but not really using any of the characters. But you know, it takes place in Shawshank Redemption Prison.
Oh man, I know all about that show.
Yeah, exactly. So Castle Rock, wicked show. In fact, you know what's funny, Stephen? I've only seen a first few episodes of the first season before the gunshot, and then apparently the gunshot is like when the show becomes the fucking show. Like, what the fuck, and all this stuff happening. It happens after this certain episode where a loud noise happens. So I'm watching Castle Rock, and back up a little bit. When Melissa and I were watching the show Fargo, the first season of Fargo, we're like, this deputy, she is amazing. This actress, she's just like fucking awesome. And everything she did in the series, I couldn't take my eyes off her. She was just so good at what she fucking did. And then there's this other movie, Detroit Rock City. Love this movie. And there's this character named Beth, and she's the young girl from Beautiful Creatures, Peter Jackson's horror movie he made before Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
Her and Kate Winslet, and they both decide to kill one of their mothers and shit. And
Yeah, it's a crazy. It's based on a true story too, right?
yeah, based on a true story, fucked up. So anyway, that actress and then this other actress from Fargo, they're like two of my favorite actors that I've ever seen on television or film. They're just, I love them. They play sisters in Castle Rock. So to see these two incredibly talented people, like, you know, acting in a scene together, and they're supposed to be family, I'm just like, man, that's fucked up. Because it's almost like, you know, I'm like, oh, pick any actresses in the world that would be that'd be amazing for these parts and in these roles. And I'm like, oh, them two. And also Jane Levy from the remake of The Evil Dead, which she did an amazing job, and she's in this movie Don't Breathe. She plays a role in Castle Rock. So the casting of Castle Rock is fucking bonkers. How fucking good it is.
You made it a few episodes in, you said?
Yeah, dude, I'm rewatching it. It's just I've been busy as fuck the last 4 months, but I have a January schedule of binging that I fully plan on. And Castle Rock is right there, man.
Dude, there's an episode on that show that's one of the most amazing episodes I've ever seen, and it felt like there was something different about it. There's an episode. Sissy Spacek is kind of the main woman in that show, the older lady.
Yeah.
And there's an episode. It's like number 7 or 8, and it's one of the most amazing fucking episodes I've ever seen of the fucking TV show. And the whole episode it's her. She has like dementia or Alzheimer's.
Yeah,
and it's a episode that just shows what that condition is like in her brain. They kind of handled it like she's kind of time traveling and seeing herself time travel, and it was so beautifully fucking done. It made me like totally fucking emotional watching it. Like I don't have anyone with dementia in my life, but how it was written, it made me so kind of like fucking feel so weird and emotional. And it was done so beautifully, showing this disease in such like a beautiful and interesting way, but like completely fucking so sad. I just had like a thought that was like there's something about this fucking episode. Like the show is dope. Yeah. Even if you're not a Stephen King fan, but this one episode, there's something so fucking special. I'm like, this episode's going to win awards. There's something so crazy about this episode. And then I later learned, like months later, that when they're writing a show, they'll have like a showrunner, and then they'll have like writers on a show, and usually they'll divvy out episodes to different writers. Like, you get this episode, okay, you work on this number 3.
Yeah.
And this one writer is like, can I have episode 7, the episode that I'm talking about? And it ended up being, man, I'm almost like fucking emotional talking about this. It ended up being that his mom had just passed away like weeks earlier from dementia, and he had been like kind of helping take care of her and stuff. And like the fucking horror that would be, you know, seeing your mom kind of forget she's your mom, and just everything that goes along with that. And he put everything that he went through and was going through into like that episode, and wrote that episode. And it explains why that episode is just like, it's just like one of the most beautiful things I've ever fucking seen, man. And it's in the middle of this like Stephen King fucking TV show. And it's just an episode that's like, here's like the easiest way to explain someone that's losing their memories, and knowing that they're losing their memories, but only in slivers of an understanding of it, but being lost in that understanding of it and not really understanding it, and then showing it to us as like a viewer. And then like, dude, when you watch that episode, you got to hit me up, because I'm like, this is just gonna, and it's all Sissy Spacek. She just owns that fucking episode. It's just her watching herself throughout her life, and she has like this totem that kind of brings her back, I think. Oh, fuck.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Anyone that's not seen that show, you gotta watch that fucking show.
And I gotta see Lovecraft Country too. Like, there's so many fucking great. There's so much great television that has come out in the last years, and there's still great shows that come out all the time. I've been saying it for the last 5 years. We've been living in kind of like the golden age of television, just based on the streaming wars, because you'll have a cinematic level of production that turns into episodic television. And never before, with the exception of The Sopranos, which changed everything when it came to what a TV show was. Like, look, I love the 90s and I love the 80s, but nobody was making a show that looked or felt like The Watchmen in the 80s. Like, the closest thing you had to it was Twin Peaks. But
in the early 90s, and maybe Oz.
Yeah, exactly. But there was a few of them, but not like this. Not like every show. Every show you see is like that now.
I know.
Fascinating thing you were talking about before. And Melissa has a great question, actually, that I'm going to ask it a little bit.
Yeah, girl.
But right before that, just a little quick thing. Miles Morales currently is probably one of the most famous superheroes in the world right now, based on that PS5 game. Yeah. And that's lovely, because Into the Spider-Verse was also a huge fucking Academy Award-winning movie where people also learned about Miles Morales. But it all comes from this, is that after Tobey Maguire didn't want to be Spider-Man anymore, they said we have to reboot. And so all these articles come out saying, well, who should be the new Spider-Man? Should it be this guy, this guy, this guy? Should be the kid from the Hunger Games? Should be this? And Mark Bernardin, a guy I love, he wrote an article called "Why Does Spider-Man Have to Be a White Guy?"
He's the one that told that Castle Rock story.
Yeah, exactly.
He's a writer on it.
Yeah, exactly. He's a writer on it, and he also is Kevin Smith's co-host of Fat Man on Batman. Everybody out there, if you've never heard Fat Man on Batman, it's my favorite fucking show in the world. It's my happy place. Thank you, Kevin Smith, and thank you, Mark Bernardin, for doing your thing. But Mark was working for Playboy.com at that point, I believe, or it was USA, one of those fucking magazines. So it was either, Playboy.com or this. And he writes in the article, well, why does Spider-Man have to be a white guy? And it got so much shit. And at one point, word got around of like, well, if he was a black guy, well, who would he be? Well, it'd probably be Donald Glover, right? So Community, doing a joke of that, they make him wear Spider-Man pajamas, which is a onesie.
I remember that.
And then writer Brian Michael Bendis, based on all the shit that it was getting about all the trolls saying, fuck you, Peter Parker's a white guy, he kind of said, well, he reads, why can't Spider-Man be a black guy? And he's just like, oh, fuck, why can't Spider-Man be a black guy? It doesn't have to be Peter Parker per se, but there's been many people who have worn Captain America's shield. There's been many people who have done this, done that. And if you make a character great, why not? And then in Ultimate Comics, Spider-Man comics, eventually, he does create this character named Miles Morales. And the rest is comic book history. But it just goes to show, it's just like, if you make an amazing character from the ground up like Miles is, that's the staying power is what it is. You can't force change and make everybody jump in on it. You gotta present something that's so fucking good that it's not real. It's like Watchmen 2. Watchmen's just an amazing fucking show. If it was just a show about a message, but the show wasn't good, then the message would get lost because the show isn't as amazing. You could take out some of the messages in Watchmen and it'd still be a great show, but the messages and the show quality come together and create that perfect marriage of making a show that will be talked about for decades as opposed to just another superhero show. So with Miles Morales, when you create a character like that for the right reasons, and all of a sudden, why is Into the Spider-Verse so good? Because they really didn't just make another superhero show; they embraced it. It almost looks like graffiti art jumping off the wall into the screen, and really created something special. And that's what I'm saying about Miles Morales, is that it's kind of like now he's in this great video game that people are fucking loving. But it's not just some updated Spider-Man video game. It's kind of its own thing at the same time. They made a great game with a great story, and that's why people are fucking loving it. That's what I'm saying.
I gotta get a PS5, man.
Well, it's still available on PS4, but I'm not sure if you're rocking a PS4.
Oh yeah, I rock that shit.
Oh yeah, Do you? Do you rock a PS4?
Yeah, man. Fucking Call of Duty.
All right, there you go. You can watch it.
Hit me up, listeners.
Yeah. But when I started loving Miles Morales prior to the movie, because I fucking love the movie. Holy shit, in the Spider-Verse, anybody, if you even thought you liked a Spider-Man anything, that is the perfect like hero, new hero, bitter, jaded adult, like almost like not sidekick, but yet a sidekick movie becoming the hero. I don't know. It's hard to explain, but in the Spider-Verse is just fucking brilliant. What I loved about Miles Morales is that I had read like 100 issues of Ultimate Spider-Man and was crushed when Peter like supposedly met his death. Like was crushed because I actually killed him twice. There was this big ultimatum where Magneto flooded the world, and you think Spider-Man's like drowned. And a little segue with that, just because you love comic books. There's this great issue during that time where J. Jonah Jameson writes up an editorial about Spider-Man and the way he lived or whatever. And he said, I never liked Spider-Man. I never liked the idea of a guy in a mask coming in, doing what he wants. But he's just like, but when we were all running in terror, trying not to die, saving ourselves any way we could, I turned around, and at this point, the Daily Bugle was completely underwater. Because, like I said, Magneto changed the what do you call the plates again that make up the world? Tectonic plates. I don't know the terminology, but basically, this huge tidal wave comes and fills New York to the extent where the water is going up to the skyscrapers. It's fucking nuts. So J. Jonah Jameson is saying, he's just like, when we're all running in terror, he turns around and you just see this big wide shot of Spider-Man diving down into the water, grabbing people, because there's all these bodies just kind of floating. And you see like throughout this long page, Spider-Man has gone down like 20 times. And he's just like, when we were all running in terror, here's this guy just trying to save anybody he can. And, you know, in this kind of writing saying like, and we will always miss him and stuff like that. But it turns out Peter didn't die that time. But then there's this other death where he like literally gets shot by accident, and he takes on the entire Sinister Six and just is out of energy. And the entire time he's like not saying, I don't want to kill Norman Osborn. I'm trying to save him. I'm trying to stop him from hurting people, but I don't want him to die. And eventually he does have to kind of drop a truck on him. But then just kind of the life force is gone. But the cover of that comic book is Uncle Ben and Peter kind of walking towards a white, white light background. And you see Uncle Ben in the Ultimate Spider-Man form with his long ponytail, because that's what Uncle Ben was, you know.
Right.
And he's just and you just hear see a thought bubble of a maskless Parker, Peter, but in a Spider-Man suit, tiny little teenager as he was, walking off in the light saying, you did good. I'm proud of you. And you're like, aw. So it turns out that Peter wasn't dead, is what I'm saying, as comic books go.
And they fucking stole a line from Babe.
Yeah, but they brought him back. The reason why I'm saying all this is because they kind of brought him back because Miles Morales had been Spider-Man for some point at this time, under the shadow that Peter died as Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
And Aunt May at this point has even kind of said, hey, it's okay, you can take Peter's mantle and stuff like that. But apparently Peter shows up and he's like sneaking in Miles's house because Aunt May at this point has given Miles his web shooters, which there's only 2 in the world because Peter invented them. And he's like, he wants his web shooters back because I can't remember what happened. Like his dad invented them or some shit. I can't remember. So Miles and him, it's the first time that Spider-Man and Miles meet each other. This is prior to Spider-Verse, like in Ultimate Comics. This actually happens. And they do this whole story together where you find out that Peter actually is kind of pseudo, like he just keeps getting, because of the spider serum, he keeps getting brought back to life, but he doesn't want to be Spider-Man anymore. He doesn't want any of it. Him and MJ, they want to run away together. He just wants to live a life. He wants to be, let's say, a Ben Reilly type and just fuck off.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end of the story, Norman Osborn, who had a similar thing happen where, you know, because of the goblin venom, he keeps coming back. You see there's this battle, and this is when I loved Miles. Finally, just it's when it clicked, because I was kind of like, you killed my Peter, because I read 100 issues. I was very attached. And Miles and the goblin at the end. The goblin's coming after them, and Miles takes them on. And Peter's like, what to everybody? Nah, it's cool. Watch this. And you see Miles like fucking punching Goblin in the face, and Goblin feels it, because Miles is actually a lot stronger than Peter ever was. And Peter's watching kind of with this approving look of his face, and he's just like, he was a better Spider-Man than I ever was. And it's really cool to see, like, you know, your character come in and sire this kid. This kid, right. This kid wasn't just assembled and pushed into it and be like, hey, everyone, here's a character accepted. It's a beautiful thing when you see your hero say, this is who I choose.
Yeah. He's got it. This guy's got it.
This kid's got it. Exactly. Yeah. It's a fucking amazing issue. I love reading comic books like that, where the hair on the back of my neck is standing up and I feel like I'm there with them and shit.
Yeah. That's what it's all about, man. That's fucking the good storytelling. That's the best shit in the world.
Yeah.
That's what real, all art shit does. That's at its best. That's what it does, right? It makes us feel some dope shit, man.
Yeah. And then of course the movie comes out, and I'm just like, this is fucking amazing and hilarious, and it's just on Into the Spider-Verse is another level.
Yeah,
it's an achievement.
It's a perfect movie, I think.
It's a fucking triumph.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any Spider-Man fan, when you see that shit, you're just like, fuck. And then later that year, Far From Home comes out, and that fucking Mysterio scene. Oh my god. Fucking what a world we live in, man. We haven't had a dancing Spider-Man in quite some time. So, well, that's all I'm saying. All right, bud. Well, we've been talking for we're talking about 3 hours. I think that's a good time to call it a night.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
but dude, this is great. It was wonderful connecting with you again, man.
Yeah, bro. Thank you so much, man. And love to Mel and everyone that was asking dope questions, and everyone listening. Is fucking rad, man. And much love to you for doing a dope show, the Ryan Stick Show, man.
Thanks for giving me a network to do it on, my friend.
Amen.
And last question tonight, before you go off into that good night, Melissa's asking if Steven could choose 2 superpowers, what would they be?
Flying, and it's tough. These are just tough. It seems so silly, but these are just tough questions because I take them seriously. I don't know. I guess flying and like superhuman intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would take flying and invulnerability, because I'm pretty sure I'll fuck up flying one point and don't want to break every bone of my body when I do.
That's one thing people think about. Like if you can fly, but you don't have superhuman stamina or speed, you're flying as fast as you can like run. So you're not flying that fast. Like you don't have super speed while you fly. You just have flight. So you're doing like a jogging level flying, which is that even worth it if you're just like jogging?
Yes, it is. It's still fucking flying.
Okay, it is. Yeah. Okay.
I always wanted to be invulnerable, because then at least, like, you know, I could train myself to be a better fighter. I wouldn't want super strength, because then you could kill somebody by accident. But if I'm invulnerable, at least I could go, you know, stand up for somebody and not get fucking stabbed in the back.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah,
man. That's a good one.
Ever since I saw Kick-Ass, I'm like, ooh, crime fighting looks fucking deadly. Ouch.
If you're the smartest guy in the galaxy, you could maybe create some sort of serum that makes you invulnerable.
I suppose. I think being the most brilliant guy in the galaxy would be very, very lonely. I know I now said we're about to go, but I really got to bring up this. There's this Peter Parker Spider-Man series that I fucking really liked. I think John Romita Jr. was drawing, where Peter is now a school teacher. And in one of the first episodes of the first comics of the run, he actually prevents a school shooting. it is happening, but because he's a teacher, and because what's really great is like when shit hits the fan, and the jocks and bullies that were always teasing this nerdy kid, he goes to the nerdy kid. He's just like, okay, listen, you're good at science, right? I need a diversion. And he's like, how do you think? And he points to the chemicals, and it's like, create something. And so the jock's like, what are you saying, Parker? This wimp. And he's just like, shut up. And then the kid goes and he fucking creates this mist and shit like that, so Peter can run freely in the hallway without being seen, and then get changed into Spider-Man. But he validated this like other lonely kid that was always bullied, who's not the shooter, but just showed some kind of like character development, in the sense that this kid who you would think is going to be the next shooter all of a sudden becomes the hero of the day, based on, you know, someone seeing him for his talents and stuff like that. So in this series, there was this one-off comic about the Rhino, and it's like an off story that's not connected to the other ones, but it shows that the Rhino volunteers for this experimental surgery, and he becomes brilliant. And then you see in a few months later, he becomes smarter and smarter and smarter, and ends up being like one of the top criminals in New York, because he's so smart, and becomes smarter and smarter. And eventually he gets the girl of his dreams. He gets this, he gets that. But then eventually he becomes so lonely, because he's just like, everything I say to everybody, they don't understand what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually he goes back to the scientist that gave him the intelligence. He says, please take it away. I was happier as just a big dumb idiot, as opposed to being the smartest person in the world, but feeling so isolated.
It's like Dr. Manhattan just having to go to Mars because he's just done.
Yeah, exactly.
Done with the humans.
Yeah. Like, can you picture Dr. Manhattan listening and reading Twitter and just thinking of the shitty things that people like just freak out at each other over? And he's just like, dude, I go to Mars. I see the past and present. All this shit that you're going to burn your entire day out on is useless. Like, just.
But don't forget, we know also what he can do.
Yeah, there you go.
He feels that way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't want to spoil nothing, but watch the show.
Watch the fucking show, yeah. All right, bud. This is fucking awesome, man. Thanks so much, Steven.
Yeah, thank you, brother.
All right, to everyone on Facebook, good night.